was exactly what you would expect from a cop who spent more time at the precinct than at home. The wallpaper peeled at the corners like old scabs, the carpet was a malted grey that might have been blue in another decade, and the persistent smell of mildew suggested the plumbing was older than the landlord cared to admit. It wasn't much, but it was my refuge from the chaos of New York City. My own rundown castle. One lethargic Sunday afternoon, as the city exhaled the heat from the relentless August sun, I stood on the fringes of my small bathroom, scrutinising my reflection in the faded mirror. I needed a shave. My beard was a rough map of the past stressful week. As I nudged the mirror to get a better angle, it shifted slightly, revealing a corner of yellowed paper tucked behind it. Curious, I pried the mirror further open. It creaked in protest, the sound sharp in the quiet apartment. Behind it, I found an envelope, the paper thin and brittle to the touch. Written on the front in a hurried scrawl was, "Rules of Passage." My brow furrowed. My first thought was a prank, some twisted joke played by a fellow officer or a friend. But as I sliced the envelope open and unfolded the letter inside, the list of rules I found was anything but ordinary. Do not make eye contact. Do not speak to them. Never carry more than what can fit in your pockets. Do not take what is dropped. Ignore all pleas for help. Do not eat or drink anything. Avoid the man in the conductor's uniform. Never go beyond the last platform. Never board the train. And if you wish to leave, you must jump in front of the train. I read through the list twice, then a third time. My initial reaction was disbelief, mixed with an uneasy chuckle. It had to be a joke, a bizarre, detailed, and somewhat macabre joke, but a joke nonetheless. I imagined my buddy Rick's laughter when I'd confessed to being spooked, the precinct's break room echoing with hoots and hollers. Shaking my head, I placed the letter on the bathroom counter, my detective's mind idling not in the lack of dust around the mirror. It was odd, given the general neglect of my cleaning habits. The rules themselves were nonsensical, yet oddly specific. Avoid the man in the conductor's uniform. Never board the train. It read like a bad movie script. The practical part of me wanted to crumble the paper up and forget it ever existed. Yet something nagged at me. A whisper of curiosity, or perhaps the echo of instinct honed by years on the force, telling me not to dismiss it outright. With a resigned sigh, I tucked the letter into my jacket pocket, figuring it might make for an amusing story to share with Rick the next day. As I reset the mirror, my reflection staring back at me seemed to carry a hint of caution, as if tired eyes looking back at me also whispered, "Be careful." I left the bathroom, the letter's words echoing in my mind. It was just a prank, I assured myself. But as the city outside buzzed and the shadows in my apartment deepened with the settling sun, the list of rules felt more like a warning than a joke. And deep down, as the evening crept over New York, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had just taken a turn. A week had passed since I discovered the bizarre list of rules behind my bathroom mirror. Each day the letter's presence gnawed at me, an itch in the back of my mind that wouldn't subside. The rules haunted my thoughts, whispering through my daily routine, disturbing my sleep. Finally, unable to quell my growing obsession, I decided to investigate. It was late, the kind of late that blackened the city in a deep, uneasy quiet. I stood before the bathroom mirror, letter in hand, rereading each rule as if trying to decode a secret message hidden in plain sight. With a deep inhale, I gripped the edges of the mirror and pulled. The mirror gave with a little groan, revealing not just the wall behind, but an opening. A dark, elongated tunnel that seemed to stretch into an impossible nothingness. Curiosity, sharp and demanding, overtook my hesitation. Flashlight in hand, I stepped into the tunnel. The air was cool and damp, the walls rough and encrusted with what looked like centuries of grime. I walked for what felt like miles, the beam of my flashlight a small, brave spot of light against the overwhelming dark. Suddenly, the tunnel ended, and I stepped out onto a platform. I blinked in astonishment. Before me lay a subway station, seemingly ripped from the 1940s. It was perfectly preserved, as if it was still in use. Advertisements for victory bonds adorned the walls, and the scent of an old, dry wood mixed with a faint trace of tobacco smoke hung in the air. My footsteps echoed onto the stone platform as I moved cautiously forward. The train station was eerily quiet. No announcements, no clattering of trains. Then I saw them. People, or rather, figures that resembled people. each dressed in period attire, their faces blurred and indistinct, going about their business as if I wasn't there. I remembered the first rule: do not make eye contact. Lowering my gaze, I observed them from the corners of my eyes. They didn't speak or interact with me. They seemed completely unaware of my presence, phantoms of a bygone era caught in a loop of routine. A sudden chill made me shiver, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. As I ventured deeper into the station, I recalled the second rule: do not speak to them. I bit my tongue as a spectral old man nearly bumped into me, muttering apologies to no one as he shuffled past, newspaper under arm. My attention then shifted as a figure distinct from the rest paced the platform. It was a man in a conductor's uniform, his face harsh and creased with what looked like pure anger. The uniform was impeccable, the buttons polished to a shine, and his cap pulled low over his brow. As I watched, the conductor stopped and surveyed the platform with a scowl, his eyes seeming to look right through the spectral passengers. I kept my distance, observing the conductor's routine, noting his paths and stops. The longer I stayed, the more the place felt suffocating, a strange pressure building in my ears. Remembering the final rule, I knew it was time to leave. I couldn't risk getting trapped here. I turned towards the tunnel, then hesitated. On the ground near where I had appeared was a handful of coins, old and tarnished. Do not take what is not dropped. The rule echoed in my mind. These were dropped, so it must be fine, right? I picked them up, rationalising that it was worth the risk for proof that I wasn't hallucinating. With one last wary glance at the stern-faced conductor, I turned back to the tunnel to realise it was sealed. I placed my hand on the wall and felt nothing but cold, unyielding stone. I remembered what I had to do and scanned the scene until I saw a track with a train only beginning to take off. It accelerated at an impossible rate, but I was able to make it to the edge of the platform just in time. I jumped in front of the phantom machine that made no sound as it raced towards me. Closing my eyes at the last moment, I braced for impact, only to find myself tumbling onto the cold, hard tiles of my bathroom floor. Gasping for air, clutching the coins in my fist, I lay there for a moment. The reality of my apartment crashing back around me. I had escaped the station, but the station hadn't quite left me. As I stood, shaky and disorientated, the weight of the coins in my hand was a solid, undeniable confirmation of the night's reality. The portal was real, the rules were real, and I had a fist full of evidence. The first trip through the mirrored tunnel left me both exhilarated and terrified. The coins I'd pocketed, a handful of pre-World War II nickels and dimes, were tangible proof of my unbelievable journey. As morning light steeped through the grimy windows of my apartment, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the events of the night replaying in my mind like a looped film reel. Determined to understand the value of my find, I decided to visit a local antique shop known for its collection of coins and historic memorabilia. The small bell above the door jingled as I entered, the musty smell of old books and rust greeting me. The shopkeeper, an old man with thick glasses perched on his nose, looked up at me from his newspaper as I approached the counter. "Can I help you?" the shopkeeper asked, eyeing my nervous demeanour. "I found these in my grandfather's attic," I lied smoothly, placing the coins onto the counter. Wondered if they might be worth anything. The shopkeeper picked up a coin, his eyes narrowing as he examined. Pre-war coins? Quite a nice find indeed. He tested each coin with a small magnifying glass, then looked up at me, curiosity sparking in his eyes. Not something you see every day. "Where did you say you found them?" "My grandfather's attic. He was a bit of a collector," I repeated, maintaining my facade of casual disinterest. After a few minutes of haggling, I walked out of the shop with a substantial amount of cash, much more than I had anticipated. The weight of the money in my pocket felt like a burning promise of potential. However, before I made it out the door, the shopkeeper said something that stuck in the back of my mind. "A word of caution," the shopkeeper said, his voice low and urgent. "The treasures of the past often come with a price. Be sure you're willing to pay for it." Fueled by my success, my visits to the station became more frequent. Each journey through the tunnel was a calculated risk, but the temptation of easy wealth was too strong to resist. I followed the rules meticulously. Never make eye contact. Never speaking to the spectral passengers, and always avoiding the conductor. My collection grew. Old bills, more coins, even a few historical trinkets small enough to fit into my pockets. But with the increase in visits, my behaviour at work began to change. I was distracted, my thoughts constantly wandering to my next trip through the mirror. My colleagues took notice, especially when I started showing up with new watches and unexplained cash. Rumours started, whispers of evidence tampering, or even worse. Rick Dalton, a fellow detective and supposed friend, confronted me one day in the locker room. "Hey Johnny, you hitting the casino these nights? You got the look of a man who's found a gold mine." "Just some good luck on a few bets," I deflected, uncomfortable with the scrutiny. Rick raised an eyebrow, but didn't push any further. The conversation, however, heightened my paranoia. I knew I needed to be more careful, but the call of the coins, the whisper of the wind through the station, it was irresistible. One afternoon, after pocketing a particularly rare find, a 1941 Liberty $half, I decided it was time to lay low for a while. I had enough stashed away to ease up, but as I turned to leave the station, I felt a chilling gaze on my back. Twisting around, I saw the conductor, standing far down the platform, staring directly at me. My heart skipped a beat. Had I been too greedy? I quickly averted my gaze and rushed to the platform of a train just starting to accelerate. Jumping in front of an accelerating train, I braced for the now familiar jolt, only to awaken in my bed, sweating and shaken. The room felt colder, the shadows deeper, and as I clutched the Liberty dollar, I realised I'd crossed a line. The game was changing, and the rules might not protect me much longer. The precinct was bustling, the air thick with an unusual blend of coffee, anxiety and determination. I felt the weight of eyes on me as I navigated through the desks, my recent financial uptick not going unnoticed among my colleagues. Whispers followed me like shadows, each murmur a thread weaving a net of suspicion. Rick Dalton finally cornered me near the water cooler, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "Johnny, can we talk?" he asked, nodding towards the empty interrogation room. Inside, the room felt colder than usual, the stark lighting highlighting the seriousness on Rick's face. "It's about these sudden gains of yours, John. People are talking. They're saying you might be into something off the books." My stomach tightened. I'd known this conversation was coming, yet it did little to ease the sting. "Rick, it's nothing shady, I swear." Rick raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "Then explain it to me. Make me believe it, because right now it looks bad. Real bad." I hesitated, the secrets of the mirror and the station heavy on my tongue. I'd kept it all so close, but Rick's trustful eyes, the history we shared, all demanded the truth. "It's complicated, more than you can imagine," I started, my voice low. "But I'll show you, both of you," I added, noting Lucy Grant hovering near the door, her intuition clearly piqued. Later that evening, under the guise of casual beers, I led Rick and Lucy into my dimly lit apartment. The mirror, once just a reflective surface, now felt like a gateway to pandemonium. "Before I show you, you need to promise me, whatever you see, whatever you hear, you keep it between us, and follow my rules strictly," I instructed, my tone grave. Lucy, ever the skeptic, crossed her arms. "You're freaking me out, John." Rick clapped me on the back with a half-hearted chuckle. "Lead the way, officer." I pulled the mirror aside, revealing the dark, elongated tunnel behind it. Rick's chuckle died down in his throat, his eyes widening in disbelief, while Lucy let out a low whistle. "Jesus, John, what is this?" Rick stepped closer, his detective instincts kicking in, examining the edges, the depth. "It's a tunnel to another time, another place. Sounds crazy, but that's the best way I can explain it," I said, stepping into the darkness to demonstrate. Hesitant yet intrigued, Rick and Lucy followed. The walk through the tunnel was quiet, the air thick with anticipation, and the cool dampness of the unseen world around us. Emerging onto the platform of the station, we were each hit by the authenticity of the scene. The smell of coal and old wood, the sound of distant trains, the murmur of spectral passengers in period attire. All of it was just so overwhelming. "This is unbelievable," Lucy murmured. Her previous scepticism vanished, replaced by awe and a hint of fear. "It's like we've stepped into the past." I reiterated the rules. No eye contact, no speaking to the passengers, take only what is dropped, and most importantly, never board the train or go beyond the last platform. When it's time to go, jump in front of a train. Why all the rules? Rick asked, scanning the bustling ghosts of the past. They're not just for show. I don't know what happens if you break them, but I promise you, it's nothing good, I emphasised, watching a porter pass by with a cart of luggage. We moved cautiously along the platform, the spectral figures brushing past us, each locked in their own silent world. The temptation to interact was palpable, but my stern reminder of the rules echoed in their minds. As we turned to leave, a glint of silver caught my eye, an old coin, lying just beside the tracks. I picked it up, showing it to Rick and Lucy. Everything here is real, from back then, and it's valuable, but we must be careful. We spent a few minutes wandering around, collecting oddities off the floor. When we were all ready, with a nod, we jumped down onto the tracks and let the blinding light race towards us. Moments later, we came to, on the bathroom floor, followed by several minutes of silence. "What now?" Lucy asked, the reality of our discovery settling in. "Now, we decide what to do next," I said, knowing well that the temptation of the station, its dangers cloaked in a law, would test all of us. Weeks passed by as Ricky, Lucy and I regularly visited the station, our pockets growing heavier with each visit. The temptation of wealth overshadowed the dangers, the rules becoming more of a guideline than a lifeline. It was a late summer evening when we found ourselves once again on the familiar platform, the air thick with anticipation and the musty scent of the past. Lucy, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous curiosity, pulled Rick aside as I rummaged through a pile of abandoned suitcases. "I want to try something," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant rumble of trains. Before Rick could protest, Lucy approached one of the spectral passengers, a woman in a faded flowery dress, her face a blur of muted features. With deft fingers, Lucy slipped the woman's necklace off of her and into her pocket, a victorious grin spreading across her face. But as she turned to Rick, her triumph faltered at his expression of pure, unadulterated horror. Confused, Lucy spun back to the woman, only to find herself staring into her face now hauntingly clear, mascara-stained tears streaking down her cheeks.
"Help me,"
the woman pleaded. Her voice was a chilling whisper. I'm sorry, Lucy stammered, her words swallowed by the sudden deafening silence that descended upon the station. I, realising the unfolding catastrophe, could only watch as every spectral figure turned towards Lucy, their faces contorted in a collective rage. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," Lucy whimpered, her voice small and broken as the ghostly crowd advanced, her hands outstretched, grasping, tearing in the distance. The conductor's eyes blazed with a fury that burned through the very fabric of reality. Lucy's screams echoed through the station as the vengeful spectres descended upon her, their incorporeal forms suddenly all too solid and all too violent. Rick, his mind reeling, stumbled back towards the tracks, his voice cracking as he yelled to me, "We need to leave now." I, transfixed by the spot where Lucy had stood just moments ago, barely registered Rick's words. As we turned to flee, the conductor materialised before us, his presence a suffocating force, his anger palpable. He pointed at me, then at Rick, his eyes promising retribution as he strode towards us with purposeful steps. "Jump now, in front of the train!" I screamed, my voice raw with desperation, but Rick, consumed by panic, made a fateful decision. As the spectral train glided into the station, its form a shimmering apparition, Rick leaped through its closing doors, my anguished cries fading behind him. Reaching the platform's edge, I could only watch as the train carried Rick away, his face a mask of sheer terror pressed against the window. The conductor, his scowl deepening, watched the train disappear into the abyss, his vengeance unsated. With a pounding heart and ragged breaths, I steeled myself for the inevitable. As the train approached, I closed my eyes, whispered apologies to my fallen friends, and jumped. My hands shook as I stared at the blank wall where the hole once was. The ghost to the portal that had swallowed my friends, now just a patch of mismatched paint in my dimly lit bathroom. The reality of Rick's terrified face pressed against the train window haunted me. The echo of Lucy's screams merged with the constant oppressive silence of my apartment. In a frantic haze, I grabbed a hammer and began to tear into the drywall, each strike a mix of hope and desperation. Dust and plaster flew around me as I dismantled the wall piece by piece, revealing not the eerie station or the darkened tunnel, but the mundane sight of my kitchen tiles through a jagged hole. With nothing left to do, I put the mirror back up, covering the scars of my frenzy. The reflection that stared back at me was a man broken, eyes hollow, the weight of my unshared secret. The following weeks were a blur of police activity and whispered rumours. I participated in the searches for Rick and Lucy, my gut twisting with every false lead and dead end. The precinct was rife with speculation and suspicion, the eyes of my colleagues probing and questioning. I maintained a facade of concerned confusion, but inside I was full of guilt and fear. At night I lay awake, the images of my last visit replaying behind my eyelids, the anger in the conductor's eyes, the spectral hands reaching for Lucy, Rick's decision to board the train. The rules we had broken had haunted me, each one a lash against my conscience. Weeks turned into a month, and the search for Rick and Lucy began to dwindle, the case growing cold, but never settling. The precinct slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but I felt detached, moving through my duties as though underwater. One quiet evening, as I sat at the kitchen table nursing a beer, a faint tapping sound pulled me from my thoughts. It was rhythmic, insistent. With a heavy heart, I stood and made my way to the bathroom. The sound grew louder as I approached. I reached out a trembling hand and took the mirror down once more, expecting to see the dark tunnel stretching out before me. Instead, there was only a wall. Innocuous and taunting, I replaced the mirror, but as I turned to leave, a small envelope slid out from under the edge of the frame. I picked it up, the paper familiar yet ominously heavy in my hand. I tore it open, and a single, folded piece of paper fell into my palm. Unfolding it, I read the new set of rules, my heart sinking with each word. Do not return for them. Do not look for doors where there are none. The past cannot be saved. Remember them as they were. It was early in November of 1997 that a series of very strange sessions led a child psychologist in Maine to contact the authorities. It began when a patient of his began to tell him about one of their friends. This friend being imaginary as far as both the psychiatrist and the boy's parents were concerned. He called his friend
Mr. Smile,
and would talk about him at a great length during some sessions. The boy called him Mr. Smile because he was always smiling, and because when he was around, the boy said everything felt happy. He said that there was a feeling of everything being okay. The boy in question was being treated for serious issues to do with anger and depression, but when Mr. Smile was around, he said all the anger and the sadness just seemed to disappear. He said that Mr. Smile wouldn't speak, but rather just stand there at the foot of his bed. He smelled like candy floss, and just by being there, he made the boy feel calm and safe. The psychiatrist assumed this imaginary friend was some sort of coping mechanism the boy had developed to deal with the problems at home that had led to his violent temper, and thought nothing much of it, until another patient, a girl of about 9 years old, also began talking about her imaginary friend.
Mr. Smile,
And then a boy of 7, and then a boy of 12, and then a girl of 11 years of age. All in all, close to 15 separate patients all began to talk to him about
Mr. Smile.
the first few he had put down to coincidence. After all, many children have imaginary friends, and the name and description of Mr. Smile was just generic enough that it wouldn't concern him too much at first. But as more and more of his patients told him about Mr. Smile, he began to grow concerned. He asked for more details. Every single one of them described him the same way, using the exact same words. Now, there was no way that all of these children could be in contact with each other. 5 of them, for instance, were currently being homeschooled, and according to their parents when he spoke to them, never really left the house, except when it was to accompany them on shopping trips and the like. There was no way every single one of these kids could have rehearsed or prepared their statements together, which led him to a truly deep, disturbing conclusion. He spoke privately of each of the children's parents one at a time. He avoided disclosing too much information, but told them that something troubling had cropped up in multiple sessions with various patients, and that he believed that there is a chance that their child was at risk. He asked for their permission to discuss the matters with the authorities, and the parents gave their consent, provided they were kept in the loop as to what was going on. And so, over the course of the next week, the police came and talked to the children about their friend. They were asked for details about his appearance, which they couldn't seem to describe apart from the smile, and that he was not like them. Because by this point, the psychiatrist, the parents and the police were all convinced that Mr. Smile was quite real and quite dangerous. The authorities had checked to make sure there were no known predators living in the area, which they had confirmed was not the case. But it was quite clear whoever this Mr. Smile was, he was a real person who had been sneaking into the homes of these children at night. None of the children claimed to know how he got in. They said they would just wake up and he'd be there at the foot of their bed. Sometimes they said he'd be singing something, but not in English. It always sounded like a lullaby, they said, and it made them feel safe. Finally, the children were asked to draw Mr. Smile, as they couldn't put it into words how he looked. Each and every one of the children picked up a red crayon and proceeded to colour in the entire page until it was just a rectangle of red. When asked about this, they insisted that they had drawn Mr. Smile. When asked where his head, arms and legs were, they would just insist that they had drawn those. They claimed that they had drawn a perfect picture of a man at the foot of their bed, and when they were told that they had simply coloured in the page and not drawn anything at all, they became deeply angry, feeling as that they were being accused of lying and insisting that what they had drawn was a picture of the man that they had seen. Acting more on a hunch than anything else, the psychiatrist decided to show one of the coloured rectangles to the various children and asked them what it was. Each and every one of them, with no knowledge of what this picture was supposed to be or who had drawn it, and with no knowledge that the other children there had been spoken to about this subject even existed, replied that it was a picture of Mr. Smile. Cameras and baby monitors were placed in the children's rooms so that they could be monitored. Many of the parents simply stopped sleeping altogether, staying up all night staring at the screens that displayed where their children slept. At no point did anyone enter or exit the bedrooms. No sounds, except for them snoring or occasionally talking in their sleep, were heard over the baby monitors. There was no sign of Mr. Smile. After almost 2 weeks of this, many of them began to doubt that Mr. Smile had ever even existed. Other psychiatrists since have put the whole thing down to some strange, shared delusion that, while it couldn't be explained, yet did not have any basis in reality. Some suggested that maybe this whole
Mr. Smile
thing had its basis in a TV show or film that the children had all watched, leading them all to dream up something similar. Then, one of the boys went missing. The camera in his room had gone dead at around 2 in the morning. His mother had to run to check in on him, only to find his room empty. It had literally taken her less than a minute to run to his bedroom. There was no possible way for him to leave, or to be taken, and be out of sight in the time it took her to leave her bedroom and run towards his. But he was gone. She said there was a smell, like cotton candy, in the room. The search for the boy had turned up nothing. No one had seen anything strange or unusual around the home before or during the disappearance, and no trace of him was ever found. It was less than a week later that one of the girls who had spoken of
Mr. Smile
vanished as well. Then another of the boys. One by one, each of them began to disappear. Only 4 remained. The 4 remaining children began to talk about how
Mr. Smile
and his friends were going to take them away soon. When asked about these friends, they talked about how Mr. Smile lived with the other smiling men in the happy place, and that he would take them there soon. They said there were lots of people there already, and that in the happy place, everything was beautiful. They said they knew about it because Mr. Smile talked to them in their heads, because he couldn't talk like other people did, and that he would show them pictures in their heads of the place they were going. Things began to get incredibly disturbing. After a few weeks, the children began complaining of headaches and nausea. The schools reported that they had begun suffering hallucinations, and 2 of them started complaining that they didn't like the place that
Mr. Smile.
was showing them anymore. One began screaming for half an hour, acting as if they were having a fit and screaming for the colours to stop, that the colours were horrible and that they needed to go away. One of the children claimed that Mr. Smile was talking to them in their head all the time now and was telling them things. Terrible things. But they couldn't talk about it. They mustn't, because their parents would know about the terrible things too. The psychiatrist asked them to write down what Mr. Smile was saying, promising that he would show it to no one, managing to gain the trust of one of the boys enough that he agreed. The contents of the book are known only to him and the authorities, but whenever anyone involved has been asked about it, they get real quiet, and quickly find an excuse to change the subject. The children stopped sleeping. Footage from the security cameras showed them sitting bolt upright, their eyes unblinking, just staring at the wall without moving or making a sound. Sedatives did nothing. One of the girls began cutting strange circular marks into her skin, while 2 of the boys ceased communication in English altogether. The language they spoke was never identified, and despite numerous people being asked to listen to them, they couldn't translate what they were saying. By the start of 1999, all 4 of the children had vanished into thin air. There was no trace of who took them. Searches have turned up nothing to this day, with no indication of where they are or if they're even dead or alive. No suspects have ever been found either. All 4 of them appear to simply vanish into thin air, much like the others, all of whom also remain missing. Their disappearances unexplained. Dark, cold and eerie. Those are the only words I can come up with to describe the house in which I had lived with my family for the majority of my life. Mostly dark, blistering cold during the winter, and always eerie. Sometimes there'd be strange noises coming from the cellar too. It had often given me the creeps, though I would never admit that to my mother. I'd figured I was too old to let some silly noises scare me anyway. I'd been trying to act like the man of the house ever since my dad left when I was 7. I'd always hoped that I would never turn out like my father, whom I hated with a burning passion. As far as he goes, I suppose I'd better just leave it at that. I lived in the house with my mother, Linda, and my uncle, Kevin, on a vast piece of land in Steinin, Indiana. Steinin was a tiny piece of shit in the middle of nowhere. Nobody liked living there. I didn't have any friends because I was homeschooled, and I'd never seen another kid my age in Steinin, since we almost never left the house unless my mother had to go into town to buy groceries. However, I was always very close to Uncle Kevin. When I was little, he would tell me ghost stories right before bed, which my mother hated. "Stop it, Kev, you're gonna give him nightmares," she would snap. Oh, I did definitely get nightmares indeed, and sometimes it seemed as though the nightmares refused to end. They crept into the back of my mind like a spider crafting its web. The story he told most often was one about a monster with a contorted body and black eyes. According to the legend, as Uncle Kevin called it, even though I knew he made it up himself, the monster would come into your room if you were awake past your bedtime and hide in your closet, watching you the whole night. Of course, this was just a silly little tale that Kevin would tell me so I didn't stay up late. Even so, I can't tell you how many times that horrible creature has popped into my head over the years. On this particular night, I decided to go to bed early in an attempt to sleep off a pounding headache. I lied down on my icy bed and sank underneath the covers, hiding my face from whatever may be lurking inside of my head. After setting my glasses down on a nightstand beside my bed, I reached over and flicked the light off. The darkness made me feel alive in a very strange way, almost as though I was mesmerised by the nothingness. As I looked around the room, seeing almost nothing but the pitch black darkness surrounding me, I felt entranced, as if something was forcing me to look. Of course, there was nothing to look at least not with your eyes. This was something you could only witness within the deepest corridors of your mind, the part of your mind that you always dread visiting and can never seem to return from. Out of nowhere, I began to hear scratches upon the window above my bed. My eyes immediately burst open and I felt like I was unable to close them again. What the fuck was that? I asked myself under my breath. Nothing, of course. It was nothing. It couldn't have been anything, right? Right. Just my mind playing tricks on me in the dark. No big deal. But in a moment of childish curiosity, I decided to peer out of the window, just to make sure I was hearing nothing more than a tree branch brushing up against the glass. But then it hit me like a bag of bricks. There is no tree next to my window. Still, I decided it'd be better to sleep it off and think more about it in the morning. It was probably all in my head anyway. It had to be. I found it unusually difficult to fall asleep that night, as if somebody or something was trying to keep me up. I woke up the next morning with that sound still locked in my brain. It had to be coming from somewhere, but where? Shit, I had no idea. But then, I remembered. The cellar. I built up as much courage as I could muster and slowly crept down into the abyss. Jesus, I hadn't been down here in a year, maybe longer. I'd almost forgotten what it looked like. Nothing but clouds of cobwebs and stacks of cardboard boxes shoved against the walls. I rustled through a couple of boxes until I stumbled upon a picture I'd drawn when I was a child. It was a sketch of a grotesque creature. It definitely wasn't human. This thing barely even had a face, just dark black eyes and no mouth. Its body was tall and thin and was contorted into a shape that I had never even seen before. The more I looked at the drawing, the more I was reminded of that story my uncle used to tell me. It appeared to be raining above the creature, and toward the bottom of the paper I had scribbled,
Please stay awake.
in giant letters. I didn't know what the hell that was supposed to mean, but I folded up the paper and stuffed it in my pocket. I quickly made my way back up the staircase and into the kitchen and went about my day as usual, keeping that drawing in my mind, trying to remember what it meant and why I'd drawn it in the first place. I looked outside and noticed it had begun to rain. I didn't want to think about that creature any longer, so I walked into my dimly lit room and plopped onto my bed. I fell asleep before I even knew it. When I awoke, it was exactly 3 a.m. This night was colder and darker than usual. The farm was soaked up with rain from earlier in the evening. The moon was full and radiant. It almost didn't look real. For an instant, I glanced out of my bedroom window, and I swear I could see something walking quickly through the yard. When it spotted me, it slunk behind a tree, as if it was trying to hide from me. It looked exactly like what I had drawn when I was a child. I ran into Uncle Kevin's room and began shaking him awake. Kevin. He rubbed his eyes. What's up, bud? What's wrong? It's late, he asked, bewildered at my excitement. I looked at him in his bloodshot eyes and softly said, I saw someone in the yard. Kevin looked at me with hesitation. No, you probably just saw an animal. Get back to bed. I know what I saw. This was no animal, or at least not one I'd ever seen, not even in my worst fucking nightmares. I knew I couldn't tell him exactly what I had seen, as he would never believe me. No, Kevin, it wasn't an animal. Please, it was a man. I think... Look, just please go out and check. Uncle Kevin leapt up and grabbed his shotgun from under the bed. Alright, fine, come on, show me where he is. Let's try not to wake up your mum. I'll scare the fucker off. We went outside and I pointed to the tree and I whispered to Kevin, I saw him go behind that tree. My uncle bravely walked up to the tree and peered around it. Nothing. He searched the entire farm for well over half an hour, but he never found anyone or anything. Let's go back in, bud. There's no one out here. Keep the doors locked tonight. He was wrong. I knew there was something out there. I crawled into bed and threw the covers over my face. I could hear the blistering wind coming from outside. It pierced my ears with a whistle I thought only dogs could detect. Suddenly, I heard a tapping sound upon my window. The sound grew louder with each tap. I tightened the blankets around my body. The taps slowly turned into knocks, louder and faster the knocks became. The knocks turned into bangs. I thought the glass was going to break. Then, out of nowhere, it stopped. No more taps, no more knocks, no more bangs, no more wind. I was relieved. Suddenly, I heard a low, chilling voice in my ear.
Please stay awake.
It couldn't be. No, it couldn't be. I ran into the hallway, ready to make my way into my mother's room, when I saw it, whatever it was. I still don't know. It was holding Kevin's lifeless, mangled body in its arms. Carved deeply into my uncle's torso were the words,
Please stay awake.
I tried to let out a scream, but only silence filled the dead air. I sprinted through the door of my mother's bedroom and saw her body lying in the middle of the floor. She was covered in blood and her left arm had been ripped straight out of its socket. Written next to her in her own blood were the words,
Please stay awake.
I began to sob, and when I turned around, the creature was gone. I don't know where the hell it went, and I'm not sure I want to. I closed my eyes as tightly as I could and let out the loudest scream I could muster. I called the police and lied down on the cold, now blood-soaked floor, waiting for them to arrive. It felt like hours. Finally, the police showed up to find me in the fetal position next to my own mother's corpse. I told them everything I saw. I showed them my drawing. I told them about the taps, the knocks, the bangs. I told them what I'd seen outside. But of course, they wouldn't hear a word of it. Why would they? All they could see was a lonely kid hovering over his dead mother, her blood covering my clothes almost as much as it covered the floor. It's cold in this cell. It's dark and lonely. The silence is the only saving grace. Constant, peaceful silence. Tonight it's raining outside. It's colder, darker and wetter than ever. But, unfortunately, I must stop writing now. I think I just heard a tap on my window. This can't be what I think it is, I said out loud to myself. My friends and I had decided to get together at my place for some good old-fashioned fun. Our version of such includes competing in college drinking games. I'll tell you right now that we aren't much past college age. I'd say though that playing beer pong or flip cup isn't weird for us just yet. I'm only 35. My former roommate Jay is just a year younger, and our twin friends Kendall and Kelsey are maybe 36 or 37. We're drinking game OGs, and feel 100% confident that we can enjoy tossing a little ping pong ball into a questionably clean red Solo cup of Miller Lite for at least another year or two. Yo Jake, you or Jay ever played Depth Charge? Kelsey said. Or maybe it was Kendall. Shit, after all these years I still have a hard time differentiating between the two. Me and Jay, whose real name is Jeremiah, shared a Bio 101 class with the twins first day of college. When I knew that he wanted to be a doctor, I thought it'd be funny to call him Dr. J, like the Philly basketball legend. And it stuck. Not only were me and Jay randomly paired as roommates, but we also happened to have our first class together. And that is how our friendship started. We've been connected ever since, at least in communication in our post-college life. Jay has long since moved to the southeast to practice medicine. No, I said. I can't say I ever have, Ken. I stopped myself. Like I said, I sometimes still don't recognise which twin is which. Clearing my throat, I continued. No, I can't say I ever have. And left it at that. I suspect both Kendall and Kelsey have recognised my failure to identify them and have mercifully given me a pass. Hell, I have twin cousins. I was in my teens when they were born, so I've seen them grow up and I still don't recognise them. Thankfully, one has got a lip piercing, so that helps. But as most twins, they choose to dress, act, and always talk the same. I'm sure most twins are used to this. I was never that great at science or maths. Jay, like I said, became a doctor, so he's more than capable of helping me during the initial undergrad class. But we needed to break into groups of 4 for the lab part of the class, and we both thought the twins were cute, like every other guy. Jay's charm and my brooding mystery somehow worked, and we all partnered up. We were in the very beginning of the emo explosion in the early 2000s, and I just took to it. Brooding and dark didn't even begin to describe my personality back then. But I did like drinking, and so did Jay, so we got along right off the bat. Turned out, so did the twins, and we remained friends all throughout college and beyond. Kelsey, Jake's never played Depth Charge, she said, smiling like a goofball. They do this often, whenever people don't remember which twin they're actually talking to. It's so considerate, it hurts. One will call the other by their name, so you can cue into who you're talking to. Kendall gives me this look like, it's fine, we came all this way to hang out, don't worry about the names, and I'm much appreciative. Kelsey and Jay, having a convo of their own near the bar area in the basement, come skipping over, drinks in hand, to patch up my inexperience in this particular drinking game. It's a rare, nice, early spring day here in the great state of Michigan, where I live. All four of us met here, Central Michigan University. I've remained here to this day, not at CMU of course, but in Michigan. Jay is in the southeast as previously mentioned, and the twins both took teaching jobs in the greater Phoenix, Arizona area. As adults, we all know how hard it is to coordinate schedules, but it just so happened to work out for all of us. Jay put a group text out about a month ago seeing if we could all meet up, live up the glory days for a weekend. I quickly offered up my place, I've got the room, and thankfully we landed on an early May date that we could all do. Jay already had the time scheduled off, and the school both the twins work for happened to have a 3-day weekend for some kind of principal training. Not sure what that is, as I've been out of high school for quite some time now. Either way, here we all are, all four of us hanging out in my basement, shotgunning beers and slamming quarters. Kendall and Jay arrive at the pong table I bought online just for tonight's occasion. Kendall bumps into the edge a little bit, rocking some of the undrunk cups of light beer from an earlier pong game. How have you never played Depth Charge? Kendall looked at her identical self with a wild look of what an idiot on her face. I just stood there and shrugged, looking at Jay for some kind of backup or confirmation that he's never played either. He shrugged back at me, mouthing something like, I don't know either. He started to giggle to himself. We're all having a monster time. I see he's along for the ride here, waiting to see how the twins are about to embarrass me at Depth Charge. Even though he's never played the damn thing himself. No matter, time to take the bait. Okay, ladies and lords of drinking games, pray tell me, what is this beautiful game? The twins both laugh, almost snorting out vodka cranberry from their nose. They even drink the same thing, at all times. Kendall takes a seat at the bar, like it will help while explaining the game. Okay, so, it's a 2-player game with maybe a maximum of 4 players, which is, oh damn, exactly what we have. She extends both of her arms out, reiterating that there are in fact 4 of us. You fill up a pint glass of beer and ever so gently place a shot glass in the middle. If you do it right, it will sit just above the liquid. Then you take shots pouring sake into the shot glass. The goal is to not sink the glass under the beer. The strategy is to be the one not to sink the shot. If you do, you have to chug both the beer and the shot. Simple, right? Sounds kind of fun actually, I thought. I'm game, I said, throwing my hands in the air. Jay nods in approval, as does Kelsey. Only problem is, I don't have any sake, I said. I have a nicely stocked bar, but never thought to have sake. Just not one of the drinks I've kept in my collection. It doesn't have to be sake, but it's so light that it helps to keep the shot glass from sinking quickly. Kendall says, I want to do it the way it's supposed to be done, especially since she seems so excited about it. I can run to the party store down the road. It's only 9 o'clock, it won't take me long. I told them. They all started doing the, no, don't go out, type of thing. But I let them know it's not a problem, and I'll only be a couple of minutes. You guys put on some Taking Back Sunday or Avril Lavigne. I'll be back before you know it. Nostalgia, you see. Stepping outside, I was immediately hit by the unseasonably warm, early May weather. It made me feel content. The jingle overhead singled that I'd arrived. Mr. C's party store on 9 Mile and Jefferson, one of my homes away from home spots. I nodded to Sam, the store owner, that never seemed to have a day off. Heading to the back of the store, I found just what I was looking for. A black bottle with gold Japanese writing on it. A $14 bottle of sake. This should do. As I walked towards the counter with my prize, I stopped. I felt like I hit an invisible barrier. This can't be what I think it is. A board game? I've never seen a board game like this in any party store before. They might have playing cards or even packs of ping pong balls and cups for playing beer pong, but never board games. On the second to bottom shelf sat a dusty black rectangular box.
Lake Kill, the board game.
I felt like I was starring in a 1980s slasher or something. Dim-wit male lead finds a cursed board game, plays with naive drunk friends, brutal or maybe hilarious consequences to follow. To add to the Hollywood-like aura, I had to literally dust off the top of the box, revealing the logo. A simple red canoe with oars crossing behind it, like a skull and crossbones type aesthetic. This looked like it would be a great time. I walked over to Sam, threw the sake and the cursed board game on the counter. His expression was blank. Sam, what's up, man? He quietly grabbed a bag from behind the counter. He calmly put my black and gold sachet in it and pushed it towards me. Thanks, but I also have this here too. I tapped the top of the black rectangular box. I didn't see the price, but I know he only charged me for the bottle that he had just bagged.
You're good.
Is all Sam said. No, Sam, seriously, I want to buy this. Just tell me what...
You are good.
Sam said, serious and emotionless. I didn't want to push it, so I tucked the game under my arm, grabbed the sake, and left. Weird. I hope he's doing alright. When I got home, I kicked off my shoes, hung up my sweatshirt, and headed downstairs with the game behind my back. My three guests seemed like they were having a great time. Music was blaring, used shot glasses lined the bar, and the pizza we ordered earlier had almost been demolished. Okay, party people, I've got the stuff that's going to pop my depth charge cherry. Let's light the fuse. Jay and the twins collectively cheered, if mocking. After making myself another drink, Kendall started filling up shots for the game. As she was picking out a not so heavy shot glass to make the game last longer, I totally forgot about the other purchase I'd made. Oh, hey, you want to see something weird? That was greeted with blank stares. Probably not the best way to start a sentence. We all laughed, breaking the awkward silence. No, for real, check this out. With that, I ran back upstairs and grabbed the game. As I hopped back down the stairs, I held it out proudly in front of me, displaying it like it was Vanna White. Again, blank stares. What's this? I don't get it, Jay said. The twins nodded in agreement. I had to realise they don't know what I'd picked up from the party store. They must think I just had this laying around in the house. I explained the situation. I just happened to see it sitting on one of the shelves and how weird it was. They eventually understood how canny finding a board game like that at a party store was. So, the four of us sat up around the bar with the Lake Kill board game sitting in front of us. Well, let's play, Kelsey said. She looked at her sister to see what her thoughts were. Kendall cracked a smile. I gladly took the honours of tearing the wrapping off the box, carefully opening the lid, revealing the actual board. I removed said board, revealing a standard-looking Monopoly style. Squares littered every side. They stated things like pick a card, move 2 spaces, and lose a life. Under the board lay 2 compartments, both holding a stack of cards. One was black, the other red. There were also some icons you could use to move, like the top hat or car from Monopoly, but these were stranger. They included a hockey mask, a knife, a noose, and a diamond. My curiosity grew. Stranger still is that there were only 4 when the board game said it was rated to 2 to 8 players. I'll be the hockey mask, I guess, Jay said, which pissed me off a little bit because I wanted that one. The twins took the next 2, the knife and the noose. Guess that leaves me with the diamond. Jay started reading the instructions. This is like a Frankenstein list of rules. They don't make sense and are all moulded together. It just doesn't make much sense, man. Frankenstein's monster, I said. What? Jay said, looking confused. Sorry, it's just something that always bothers me. When you refer to something stranger or freakishly put together, it's like Frankenstein. When you really mean it's like Frankenstein's monster, not Dr. Frankenstein, the mad scientist. There was a mix of sighing and laughter, but I really had to point out the difference. Whatever, man, Jay said. It says here the oldest rolls first. Well, I guess that's me then, Kendall said, joyfully grabbing the dice. What? I'm 5 minutes older than Kelsey. Sorry. Giving a loser sign with her right thumb and forefinger making the L sign to her younger sister. Kendall rolled 3. She landed on the 3rd spot, which instructed her to pull a chance card. She read it out loud to us. Stay quiet. He's outside the door. We all seemed to stop breathing. What the hell does that mean? Before any of us could muster a response, we heard 3 loud bang noises coming from the front door above us. Now, with wide eyes, the twins looked at us. Did you order something? Or did you have someone else coming over? Kendall said. Shh, her sister said. The card said to be quiet, she whispered. 3 more aggressive bangs made us all jump. Not knowing if this was just a coincidence or someone actually at the door, I put my index finger up to my lips, signalling the others to remain quiet as I went to the base of the stairs where I could get a visual of the front door. I didn't see anything. Must have just been a coincidence. As that thought finished in my head, the lights went off. A scream escaped from the girls. It honestly could have been from any of us, but I'll choose to blame it on them. When the light turned back on, There was just a plain yellow card laying in front of Kendall. What the fuck, man? What kind of game is this? Jay said, looking at me. Kendall turned the card over to reveal only one character.
1.
At this moment, I finally realised what day it was. May 13th. Friday. Friday the 13th. Jay, keep reading the instructions. As he read, we all determined this was not an ordinary game. Jay scanned the final objective to the game. The first to obtain the 7th yellow card wins. If you do not successfully complete the tasks given, then punishments would be dished out, detailed by the other set of cards. Okay, just follow the instructions, guys, as the game's laid out. It's just a game, I said, trying to sound convincing. The knocks were just... well, I don't entirely know, but it couldn't be something related to the game. Come on now, it's just an awful coincidence. Dumb kids playing Ding Dong Ditch or something like that. But hey, we stayed quiet and won that round, so let's just stay in the spirit of the game. I know they didn't believe that. I mean, shit, I didn't even believe that. I can't believe I'd not realised we had all gathered on Friday the 13th. The first one in almost 9 months. Who's next, Jay? I asked. Jay looked flustered, but pulled the instruction pamphlet to his face. After the first roll, the turns will continue clockwise. Jay placed the instruction down and looked at me. He was sitting next to Kendall's left. Jay's turn. Jay rolled a 2. His hockey mask landed on a space that said 2 simple words.
You're safe.
What does this mean? What do we do? Next one, Jay said. I don't have to draw any cards, just, I'm safe. What's in your drink? Kelsey asked. We all looked at it. A sickly yellow card covered in an unknown sludge. Slowly fishing it out, Jay held it up.
2.
Kelsey's turn. She hesitantly rolled. The black and white die fell with a 6 face up. Pick a red card. She did as instructed. I could see her face fall when she silently mouthed the card to herself. Kendall shook her head. What does it say? Kelsey stared right ahead, silently handing the card over to her twin sister, and Kendall read it out loud. Sorry, you're not the final girl. Thank you for playing. I let out a nervous laugh, not meaning to. Relax, Kelsey, it's just a game. That doesn't mean anything. Lights out. Panic ensued between the twins, accompanied by me and Jay trying to make sense of what was happening and also calming them both down. When the lights turned back on, Kendall was holding a now blank red card. A yellow card was also in front of Kendall. I didn't wait this time. I turned it over to reveal the number.
3.
This doesn't make any sense, I thought. Why did you get the 3rd yellow card, even though it was her turn? Where the hell did the yellow cards even come from? I didn't see them in the game. Something very bad... We were interrupted by my phone. Queen's Don't Stop Me Now played at an inhuman volume level. All 3 of us clasped our ears, trying to preserve our hearing and sanity. Finding a way to finally open one eye, I firmly met my gaze with Jay. I could barely make out what he was attempting to mouth to me. Your turn. The sound waves were almost invisible. I reached with all my might, grabbing the die. A weak toss bounced the die, hitting one side, then another. The die landed. I rolled a 1. Freddie Mercury's epic voice silenced, releasing us from our auditory prison. Gasping for air, we all finally sat up, attempting to regain our sanity. Where's Kelsey? Kendall asked. Holy shit, she's gone, Jay interjected before we lost our minds. Listen, it's all part of the game. I know it doesn't sound right, but we need to continue the game before we think about this. Maybe she just freaked out and left while we're all getting our ears beaten to a pulp by Freddie Mercury. We shouldn't have jumped into this bullshit Lake Hill game, but now we can't stop. Let's just end this and we'll figure it out later. Jay sounded entirely reasonable, despite the horror we'd just gone through. A member of our party had just disappeared, for God's sake, but for some reason I understood what he was saying. I looked at Kendall, giving her a look of I'm sorry, and she returned the sentiment. I moved my diamond piece. The spot I landed on said random. I put my head down, running my hands through my black hair, the black hair that would probably seen grey spouting up in very little time. Keeping my head to the ground, I asked Jay what that means. It says you pick a card, either black or red. A feeling of dread blanketed my body. Keeping my left hand on my face, I reached out with my right for a card. I pulled the card. Opening my eyes, I read it. As I finished, I looked at my remaining two friends. They looked back at me with bated breath, like what I was about to say might end the world. The card read,
Choose which of your two friends should leave the game.
Jay immediately started shaking his head. No. How the hell does this game know how many people there are? This is pre-packaged bullshit. Parker Brothers game, man. What did you do to us, Jake? Kendall started to silently cry. Stop! I slammed my fist into the bar, rattling the game pieces and cards. Both Jay and Kendall recoiled out of instinct. I'm not going to choose between you. It's a stupid game and I would never make that decision. Look, I don't know what's going on here either. It could be supernatural, paranormal, or otherwise. But we can logically explain this. Looking at my friends, the only friends I've kept in the last 20 years, I could see my mini motivational speech had fallen on deaf ears. I think we should put this shit away and go look for Kelsey. I never thought she'd be so spooked by something like this. I stood up, made sure I had my house keys in my left pocket and my phone in my right, nodded to Jay to join me. He was about to stand up when a voice quietly sounded behind us.
You rolled. You moved your piece. You accepted the move. There is no avoiding it.
I'll take a liberty here. You don't have to choose between me or Jay. Without Kelsey, I don't want to be in and I don't want to play. Both Jay and I realised what Kendall was saying at the same time. We both turned around to stop her. What happened next was in gruesome slow motion. What we saw was one of our best friends plunge a nail file into her neck, painting my basement with burgundy red viscera. The horrific reality of what just happened is something I might not ever process. The noises she made. I shakily dropped to her side, trying to help her stay alive, but it was no use. Taking her pulse, I felt nothing, except a waxy feeling. I grabbed the alien device, pulling it towards me. A yellow card.
4.
Now it's just me and Jay, both on our knees. On either side of us was one of the sweetest people we'd ever met. In a matter of minutes, she'd lost her twin sister, and then her own life. I again put my head down. Your turn, I said. Jay didn't let his eyes leave poor Kendall. He reached for the die without saying a word. One quick glance at me, and he tossed it. The sound of the die hitting the board felt like it shook the ground beneath us. 4. He moved his bloody covered piece. He made no motion to read the board or pick up a card, so I leaned in and did it for him. Heart race time, the space said. Pick a black card. It read, your choice. Expose one secret that no one knows about you and gain 2 cards. Or face a punishment, giving your opponent 2 cards. Jay started shaking his head as he finally got up from his knees and took a seat by the bar. I don't have anything to hide, Jake. You know that. I really don't give a shit about this anymore. I want to get the hell out of here. Let's pack this thing up and go. And we have to call the police. If you didn't notice, there's one dead girl in your basement and one missing. I started to agree with him immediately, but I stopped. Jay, I started, the game is the game. We can't beat it like this. Not now. I know you're all about science and explaining shit, but look what's happening here, man. I tried to convince him as much as I could. I thought I had him. I've got nothing for you anymore, man. I have no secrets. I don't care about getting 2 cards. Punish me. I winced when he finished that sentence. I felt like, yep, lights out. Here we go again. The walls were closing in. There was banging noises coming from every direction. Jay fell to the ground again, trying to drown out the sounds of what seemed like multiple intruders. I did the same. I just wanted all this to end. When the lights finally came back on, I could see that some of my glassware had actually been tossed from its original location. Great, so now I have poltergeist activity tonight as well. Happy Friday the 13th. Happy Lake fucking Kill night. The knocking was so loud, I didn't even hear my glasses break. Every time the lights went out, we were met with something awful. I scanned the room. No yellow cards, no more blood, no more... Wait. A small white piece of paper was peeking out of Jay's shirt pocket. Did you have that there all night? I asked. He looked down to his left breast pocket. As he pulled out the note, his eyes sank as he read it to himself. The note fell from his hand. What is it? He offered no response. I slowly grabbed the note from the ground in front of him. It wasn't a note at all. It was a prescription. Well, Patrol. What is this, Jay? I asked again. I didn't know. He offered. Something in his deadpan tone told me he did know. It was supposed to treat anxiety, damn it. The side effects were stated, but the company pushed it. They paid a lot. What did you do, Jeremiah? Take the cards, Jake. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't care what the punishment is. I'll die with what I know. Pretty extreme for the good doctor I've known since college. He's one of the most upstanding people I've ever been around. Did you hurt people, man? What the hell is this? Just admit it and you'll get the cards. We're almost done with this nightmare. Jay looked around the room, seemingly planning his next action. No, I can't. For some reason, he pulled a red card without being told to by the game. What are you doing, Jay? He read the card.
You won't release your deeds, so you'll sow the seeds. You reap what you sow, after all.
With that, he placed the card back down on its face. He reached back into his front shirt pocket, producing 2 little yellow pills. I couldn't see exactly what was etched on them from where I was sitting, but I thought I made out what looked like 3 little letters. R.I.P. Jay, don't! I tried to reach for him, but it was too late. He threw them down his throat before I had a chance. A big swallow, and his pupils immediately dilated. A small amount of foam emanated from both corners of his mouth. Jay, stop. It's not worth it. Don't do this. I desperately tried to get to him, but he was gone. My best friend. My only friend now. Just canatonically pointed to his pocket. I approached him cautiously, pulling out 2 yellow cards from his pocket.
5, 6.
They read, "This will be my last turn. I'm gonna fix this. Somehow. I have no idea how, but I'll fix this." Not letting Jay out of my sight, I hastily threw the devil's die. 6. I slammed my diamond piece 6 places, reaching the first square where we started this game. The square was blank, as it was from the beginning. I didn't know what to do. It offered no instruction. Jay broke his frozen state, speaking without emotion, monotone. He said,
"Congratulations. The first to make 1 trip around the board automatically gains 1 yellow card."
I stared at him. Confusion, sadness, despair flooded my entire being. He pointed at the centre of the board game. The black and red cards were gone. The pieces, the die, they were gone. 1 yellow card sat. I shakily grabbed it and flipped it over.
7.
I woke up in my bed. My heart felt like a hammer. I wheeled myself up, immediately falling to the ground. Pain shot through my entire body, momentarily forgetting everything from last night. I ran downstairs after I puked. I found my basement bar in pristine condition. No empty drinks, no board game, no canatonic friend, no dead friend bleeding on the ground. I found my phone sitting on the bar. 10% battery left. No notifications. No missed calls. I tried calling Jay. No answer. I called both twins. Same result. I sat down, holding my smouldering head in my hands. After what felt like an eternity, I heard a text message go off. It snapped me back to reality. Opening the text, it was from Jay. "Hey man, twins just landed at Metro Airport. I'll be there in about an hour. So pumped for tonight. I think we all need this. Funny it's Friday the 13th, right? See you soon, bro." It was my 6th birthday, and my party had just ended. We had cake, pizza, and played games. Typical American birthday party. I lived with my mum and her boyfriend. His name was Steve. For my birthday, they got me one of those plastic Fisher-Price play sets. The ones that were like 4 feet tall and had a small slide. I was extremely excited about this, because it was exactly what I wanted, and I was sure it was the greatest invention since sliced bread. The playset was set up right by my door, in front of my bed. Now, before I go on to the actual part of the story you want to read, I need to give you a little background about the house I lived in. To begin with, the house was an old, blue, colonial house in upstate New York. The house was like every other home in the neighbourhood, and since Steve had just got a promotion at work, there was constantly work being done on the outside. Basically a complete remodel while we lived there. The only thing I didn't like about the house was that you couldn't get into the attic, and for some reason, bats kept getting in there, and at 6 years old, you don't like bats. My mum tucked me into bed after my birthday party at around 9 PM, a little later than usual. I remember waking up a few times that night because I was really excited to use my playset in the morning. I didn't get to play with it much on that day because of the assembly. One of the times I woke up, I remember looking at the playset when I saw two shadows, a boy and a girl. They looked like they were talking to one another. As a child, I didn't want to be scared, so I rationalised this as the shadows of trees playing tricks on my mind. And that's just what my mum would have said anyway. I managed to go back to sleep that night and didn't really think much of it the next day. I was born in June, so I usually didn't have class on my birthday. This meant I could spend the whole day playing with my friends. I didn't think about the shadows I saw the night before at all. I basically forgot that it happened. Until the next night. My usual bedtime was 8 PM, and my mum was pretty strict on this matter, so I was showered, in my pyjamas, and in bed by 8 o'clock exactly. I was lying in bed when I had a strong feeling something was watching me. I looked to the wall between my door and the playset, and the shadows were there again. This time, I paid more attention to it while I was frozen in fear in my bed. The shadow children seemed to be talking, but I still couldn't hear them. It also seemed like they were looking at each other, but it's hard to sense 3D direction from a 2D shadow. I screamed for my mum, and she ran into my room and turned on the light. At this point, the shadows disappeared. Mum then let me sleep in her bed that night, which she never let me do. She just assumed I had a nightmare. From then on, when I'd look at the wall at night, those shadows would be there. When this would happen, I'd call for my mum, and the cycle repeated. During this time, Steve and my mum would argue a lot. I wasn't sure why, but I know I didn't notice it at first. The house had also gone into a full remodelling, where almost half the house would always have something being done to it. I wished for school. This is back when school was fun, and all your friends would be there. I hated spending any time in the house, and I'd try to go to my grandma's whenever possible. This cycle repeated for a while. I'm not really sure what my mum thought about me telling her that ghost shadow people were in my room every night. I begged her to leave the hallway light on every single night, hoping the light would scare away the shadows. She obliged, but the light never did anything, and I would yell for her every single night. This continued for a while, but then, one night, something changed. Laying in bed, something felt different. I wasn't sure if I'd built up some sort of tolerance to the shadow people that were in my room, in the same place, doing nothing but silently talking to each other, or if I was just dumb. That night I decided that I didn't want to wake my mum up for some reason. I decided I'd be brave enough to walk right past the shadows to my mum's room. I think it'd be important to remember that whenever my mum would come by, these shadows would disappear, and I still don't know why. I walked past the shadows, and nothing happened. I was then in the hallway with the light right above me and my mum's room to my left. I remember looking up at the light and then back to my mum's room, then back up to the light. I did this a few times, and then I remember just staring into the light. I'm not sure why, but I was drawn to the light. This is where the story starts to get a little bit confusing, and I'll try my best to explain to you what I can. This next part will be what I can remember as of today. Then I'll try and fill in some blanks with what my family remembers and could tell me. After looking at the light, for some reason I decided that I didn't want to wake up my mum, which was weird because I never cared before that. I went back to bed, and the next thing I remember is sitting in the living room watching TV. There was construction all around me and plastic covers on the couches so that none of the drywall or new paint got on them. I remember I was sitting on the floor. I was just watching static on the TV. To me, this memory seems like an out-of-body experience. I feel like I was there, but I didn't feel in control. These memories are like a flash to me. I have them, but nothing in between. I only have one more memory being in that house. I was in my room, looking out of my window down to the driveway. It was night time, and my mum had asked her friend's mother to come over. Her name was Danielle, but everyone called her Dee. I remember watching her pull up into the driveway and giving my mum a hug. I could hear them for some reason, and this also seemed like an out-of-body experience. I heard Dee say that there was a boy and a girl spirit in the house, but they weren't the problem. The problem was that there was a dark and evil entity in the house, and that it wanted me. Dee and my mum then proceeded to burn sage in the house. I assumed I went to bed, but when I woke up, I was at my grandma's house, and it'd been 2 months after the light incident. I felt fine when I woke up, and I don't think I even noticed anything different. I often spend the night at my grandma's house. I had my own assumptions about what had happened, but I never really talked about it to my mum until I was 16. When I woke up at my grandma's, my mum had told me that we were moving out of Steve's house, that they were breaking up, and I wouldn't be going back. As I stated earlier, I talked to my mum about this, in detail, when I was 16. The memories had bothered me for so long, and I wanted answers. I told my mum the exact story that is written above. She gave me a confused look when I told her about the part with Dee. She told me I wasn't in the house. My mum proceeded to tell me how I became more and more distant as we lived in that place. Then one day, we were eating dinner, and I just passed out, head in the plate, like out of a movie. She said I had a high fever, and looked ill. My mother is the kind of person who believes in the supernatural, and I think when I passed out, she decided to accept that the ghost stories I was telling her weren't in my head. This is when she decided to call Dee, who was known around town as being a psychic. Dee told my mum to immediately get me out of the house and that she would come over. Mother drove me to my grandma's house and went back when Dee showed up. I wasn't in the house, but I was able to recall what Dee had done and said without my mum ever telling me. My mother also told me that she didn't tell Dee anything about what I had said, just that I said something was there. Since I was sick, my grandma kept a close watch on me that night. She doesn't really believe in ghosts, but when I talked to her about it, she said it was a weird night. Apparently I was making weird noises, having trouble sleeping, and had a high fever. But then it just stopped. Like in one moment, all of my symptoms just went away. I went to bed, and that's when I remember waking up. As I sit here and write this story, I'm a 21-year-old senior in college. Every so often I think back to those events, and I'm just confused. I have no answers. I try to come up with my own conclusions, but I can never think of a rational one. I have a hypothesis for what happened, but I won't share that with you now. I want you to come up with your own conclusion. Maybe someone else has gone through the same type of situation. That was the point of writing this story. I'm hoping that someday, someone will read this and be able to help me. It'd be easy to say I was possessed or something, but that just seems unreal to me. If the memories I have weren't so vivid, it'd be hard for me to believe this at all. Hell, it's hard for me to believe the memories at all anyway. But I assure you, every single detail in this story happened to me. I'm not sure why I'm writing this down on paper and not on my computer. I guess I've just noticed some odd things. It's not that I don't trust the computer. I just need to organise my thoughts. I need to get down all the details, somewhere objective, somewhere I know that I can write where it can't be deleted or changed. No, not that that's happened. It's just everything blurs together here, and the fog of memory lends a strange cast to things. I'm starting to feel cramped in this small apartment. Maybe that's the problem. I just had to go out and choose the cheapest apartment, the only one in the basement. The lack of windows down here makes day and night seem to slip by seamlessly. I haven't been out in a few days because I've been working on this programming project so intensively. I suppose I just wanted to get it done. Hours of sitting and staring at a monitor can make anyone feel strange, I know, but I don't think that's it. I'm not quite sure when I started to feel like this, when I first started to feel like something was odd. I can't even define what it is. Maybe I just haven't talked to anyone in a while. That's the first thing that crept up on me. Everyone I normally talk to online while I program has been idle, or they've just simply not logged on in a while. My instant messages go unanswered. The last email I got from anybody was a friend, saying he had talked to me when he got back from the store, and that was yesterday. I'd called him with my cell phone, but the reception's terrible down here. Yeah, that's it. I just need to call someone. I'm gonna go outside. Well, that didn't work so well. As the tingle of fear fades, I'm feeling a little ridiculous for being scared at all. I looked in the mirror before I went out, but I didn't shave the 2-day stubble I've grown. I figured I was just going out for a quick cell phone call. I did change my shirt though, because it was lunchtime, and I guessed that I'd run into at least one person I knew. That didn't end up happening though, but I wish it did. When I went out, I opened the door to my small apartment slowly. A small feeling of apprehension had somehow already lodged itself inside me, for some indefinable reason. I chalked it up to not having spoken to anyone but myself for a day or two. I peered down the dingy grey hallway, made dingier by the fact that it was a basement hallway. On one end, a large metal door led to the building's furnace room. It was locked, of course. 2 dreary soda machines stood by it. I bought a drink from one the first day I moved in, but it had a 2-year-old expiration date. I'm fairly sure nobody knows these machines are even down here, or my cheap landlady just doesn't care enough to have them restocked. I closed my door softly and walked the other direction, taking care not to make a sound. I have no idea why I choose to do that, but it was fun giving in to the strange impulse not to break the droning hum of the soda machines. At least for the moment. I got to the stairwell and took the stairs up to the building's front door. I looked through the heavy door's small square window and received quite the shock. It was definitely not lunchtime. City gloom hung over the dark night street outside, and the traffic lights at the intersection in the distance blinked yellow. Dim clouds, purple and black from the glow of the city, hung overhead. Nothing moved, save the few sidewalk trees that shifted in the wind. I remember shivering, though I wasn't cold. Maybe it was the wind outside. I could vaguely hear it through the heavy metal door, and I knew it was that unique kind of late night wind, the kind that was constant, cold and quiet, save for the rhythmic music it made as it passed through countless unseen tree leaves. I decided not to go outside. Instead, I lifted my cell phone to the door's little window and checked the signal meter. The bars filled up the meter, and I smiled. Time to hear someone else's voice, I remember thinking, relieved. It was such a strange thing, to be afraid of nothing. I shook my head, laughing at myself silently. I hit speed dial for my best friend Amy's number and held the phone up to my ear. It rang once, but then stopped. Nothing happened. I listened to silence for a good 20 seconds, then hung up. I frowned and looked at the signal meter again, still full. I went to dial her number again, but then my phone rang in my hand, startling me. I put it up to my ear. "Hello?" I asked, immediately fighting down a small shock at hearing the first spoken voice in days, even if it was my own. I'd gotten used to the droning hum of the building's inner workings, my computer, and the soda machines in the hallway. There was no response to my greeting at first, but then, finally, a voice came.
"Hey,"
said a clear male voice, obviously of college age, like me.
"Who's this?"
It's John," I replied, confused.
"Oh, sorry, wrong number."
He replied, then hung up. I lowered the phone slowly and leaned against the thick brick wall of the stairwell. That was strange. I looked at my received calls list, but the number was unfamiliar. Before I could think on it further, the phone rang loudly, shocking me yet again. This time, I looked at the caller before I answered. It was another unfamiliar number. This time, I held the phone up to my ear, but said nothing. I heard nothing but the general background noise of a phone. Then, a familiar voice broke my tension.
"John?"
Was the single word in Amy's voice. I breathed a sigh of relief. "Hey, it's you," I replied.
"Who else would it be?"
She responded.
"Oh, the number. I'm at a party on 7th Street and my phone died just as you called me. This is someone else's phone. Where are you?"
She asked, My eyes glanced over the drab whitewashed cylinder block walls and the heavy metal door of its small window. At my building, just feeling coked up. I didn't realise it was so late. I sighed.
You should come here.
She said, laughing. Nah, I don't feel like looking for some strange place by myself in the middle of the night. I said, looking out the window at the silent, windy street that secretly scared me just a tiny bit. I think I'm just going to keep working or go to bed.
Nonsense.
She replied.
I can come get you. Your building's close to 7th Street, right?
How drunk are you? I asked, light-heartedly. You know where I live.
Oh, yeah, of course.
She said, abruptly.
I guess I can't get there by walking, huh?
You could if you wanted to waste half an hour. I told her.
Right. Okay, well, I have to go. Good luck with your work.
I lowered the phone once more, looking at the numbers flash as the call ended. Then, the drowning silence suddenly reasserted itself in my ears. The two strange calls in the eerie street outside just drove home my aloneness in this empty stairwell. Perhaps from having seen too many scary movies, I had the sudden, inexplicable idea that something could look in the door's window and see me. Some sort of horrible entity that hovered at the edge of loneliness, just waiting to creep up on unsuspecting people that strayed too far from other human beings. I knew the fear was irrational, but nobody else was around. So, I jumped down the stairs, ran down the hallway into my room, and closed the door as swiftly as I could while staying silent. Like I said, I feel a little bit ridiculous for being scared of nothing, and the fear has already faded. Writing this down helps. A lot. It makes me realise that nothing is wrong. It filters out half-formed thoughts and fears and leaves only cold, hard facts. It's late. I got a call from a wrong number, and Amy's phone died, so she called me back on another number. Nothing strange is happening. Still, there was something a little off about that conversation. I know it could have just been the alcohol she had had. Or was it even her that seemed off to me? Or was it? Yes, that was it. I didn't realise until this moment, writing these things down. I knew writing things down would help. She said she was at a party, but I only heard silence in the background. Of course, that doesn't mean anything in particular, as she could have just gone outside to make the call. No, that couldn't be it either. I didn't hear the wind. I need to see if the wind is still blowing.
Monday.
I forgot to finish writing last night. I'm not sure what I expected to see anyway when I ran up the stairwell and looked out the heavy metal door's window. I'm feeling ridiculous. Last night's fear seems hazy and unreasonable to me now. I can't wait to go out into the sunlight. I'm going to check my email, shave, shower, and finally get out of here. Wait, I think I heard something. It was thunder. That whole sunlight and fresh air thing didn't happen. I went out to the stairwell and up the stairs, only to find disappointment. The heavy metal door's little window showed only flowing water as torrential rain slammed against it. Only a very dim, gloomy light filtered in through the rain, but at least I knew it was daytime, even if it was a grey, sickly, wet day. I tried looking out the window and waiting for the lightning to illuminate the gloom, but the rain was far too heavy, and I couldn't make out anything more than vague, weird shapes moving at odd angles in the waves, washing down the window. Disappointed, I turned around, but I didn't want to go back to my room. Instead, I wandered further up the stairs, past the first floor and the second. The stairs ended at the third floor, the highest floor in the building. I looked through the glass that ran up the outer wall of the stairwell, but it was that warped, thick kind that scatters the light. Not that there was much to see through the rain to begin with. I opened the stairwell door and wandered down the hallway. The 10 or so thick wooden doors, painted blue a long time ago, were all closed. I listened as I walked, but it was in the middle of the day, so I wasn't surprised that I heard nothing but the rain outside. As I stood there, in the dim hallway, listening to the rain, I had the strange fleeting impression that the doors were standing like silent granite monoliths erected by some ancient forgotten civilization for some unfathomable guardian purpose. Lightning flashed, and I could have sworn that, for just a moment, The old grainy blue wood looked just like rough stone. I laughed at myself for letting my imagination get the best of me. But then it occurred to me that the dim gloom and lightning must have meant there was a window somewhere in the hallway. A vague memory surfaced, and I suddenly recalled that the third floor had an alcove and an inset window halfway down the floor's hallway. Excited to look out into the rain and possibly see another human being, I quickly walked over to the alcove. Finding the large thin glass window, rain washed down it, as with the front door's window, but I could open this one. I reached a hand out to slide it open, but hesitated. I had the strangest feeling that if I opened that window, I would see something absolutely horrifying on the other side. Everything's been so odd lately, so I came up with a plan, and I came back here to get what I needed. I don't seriously think anything will come of it, but I'm bored, it's raining, and I'm going shit crazy. I came back to get my webcam. The cord isn't long enough to reach the third hallway by any means, so instead I'm going to hide it between the two soda machines in the dark end of my basement hallway, run the wire along the wall under my door, and put black duct tape over the wire to blend it in with the black plastic strip that runs along the base of the hallway walls. I know this is silly, but I don't have anything better to do. Well, nothing happened. I propped open the hallway to stairwell door, steeled myself, then flung the heavy front door wide open and ran like hell down the stairs to my room and slammed the door. I watched the webcam on my computer intently, seeing the hallway outside my door and most of the stairwell. I'm watching it right now, and I don't see anything interesting. I just wish the camera's position was different, so that I could see the front door. Hey, somebody's online. I got out an older, less functional webcam that I had in my closet to video chat with my friend online. I couldn't really explain to him why I wanted to video chat, but it felt good to see another person's face. He couldn't talk very long, and didn't want to talk about anything meaningful, but I felt so much better. My strange fear has almost passed. I would feel completely better, but there was something odd about our conversation. I know that I've said that everything has seemed odd, but still, he was very vague in his responses. I can't recall one specific thing that he had said, no particular name or place or event, but he did ask for my email address to keep in touch. Wait, I just got an email. I'm about to go out. I just got an email from Amy that asked me to meet her for dinner at the place we usually go to. I do love pizza, and I've just been eating random food from my poorly stocked fridge for days, so I can't wait. Again, I feel ridiculous about the odd couple of days I've been having. I should destroy this journal when I get back. Oh, wait, another email. Oh my god, I almost left the email and opened the door. I almost opened the door, but I read the email first. It was from a friend I haven't heard from in a long time, and it was sent to a huge number of emails that must have been every person he had saved in his email address list. It had no subject, and it said, simply,
"Seen with your own eyes, don't trust them they."
What the fuck is that supposed to mean? The words shock me, and I keep going over them again and again and again. Is it a desperate email just sent as something happened? The words are obviously cut off without finishing. On any other day, I would have dismissed this as spam from a computer virus or something, but the words, "seen with your own eyes." I can't help but read over this journal and think back on the last few days and realise that I have not seen another person with my own eyes or talked to another person face to face. The webcam conversation with my friend was so strange, so vague, so eerie, now that I think about it. Was it eerie? Or is it fear clouding my memory? My mind toys with the progression of events I've written here, pointing out that I have not been presented with one single fact that I did not specifically give out unsuspectingly. The random wrong number that got my name and the subsequent strange return call from Amy, the friend that asked for my email address. I messaged him first when I saw him online, and then I got my first email a few minutes after the conversation. Oh my god, that phone call with Amy. I said over the phone, I said that I was within half an hour walk to 7th Street. They know I'm near there. What if they try and find me? Where is everyone else? Why haven't I seen or heard from anyone in days? No, calm down. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. I just need to calm down. This madness needs to end. I don't know what to think. I ran about my apartment, furiously, holding my cell phone up to every corner to see if I got signal through the heavy walls. Finally, in the tiny bedroom, near one ceiling corner, I got a signal bar. Holding my phone there, I sent a text message to every number in my list. Not wanting to betray anything about my unfound fears, I simply sent, "You seen anyone face to face lately?" At that point, I just wanted any reply back. I didn't care what the reply was or if I embarrassed myself. I tried to call someone a few times, but I couldn't get my head up high enough, and if I brought my cell phone down even an inch, it lost signal. Then I remembered the computer and rushed over to it, instant messaging everyone online. Most were idle or away from their computer. Nobody responded. My messages grew more frantic, and I started telling people where I was and to stop by in person for a host of barely passable reasons. I didn't care about anything at that point. I just needed to see another person. I also tore apart my apartment, looking for something that I might have missed, some way to contact another human being without opening the door. I know it's crazy, I know it's unfounded, but what if I just needed to be sure? I take the phone to the ceiling just in case.
Tuesday.
The phone rang. Exhausted from last night's rampage, I must have fallen asleep. But I woke up to the phone ringing and ran into the bathroom, stood on the toilet and flipped open the phone taped to the ceiling. It was Amy, and I feel so much better. She was really worried about me, and apparently had been trying to contact me since the last time I talked to her. She's coming over now, and yes, she knows where I am without me telling her. I feel so embarrassed. I am definitely throwing this journal away before anyone sees it. I don't even know why I'm writing in it now. Maybe it's just because it's the only communication I've had since God knows when. I look like hell too. I looked in the mirror before I came in here. My eyes are sunken, my stubble is thicker, and I just look generally unhealthy. My apartment is trashed, but I'm not going to clean it up. I think I need someone else to see what I've been through. These past few days have not been normal. I'm not one to imagine things. I know I've been the victim of extreme probability. I probably missed seeing another person a dozen times. I just happened to go out when it was late at night or the middle of the day when everyone was gone. Everything's perfectly fine. I know this now. Plus, I found something in the closet last night that helped me tremendously. A television. I set it up before I wrote this, and it's on in the background. Television has always been an escape for me, and it reminds me there's a world beyond these dingy brick walls. I'm glad Amy's the only one that responded to me after last night's frantic pestering of everyone I could contact. She's been my best friend for years. She doesn't know it, but I count the day I met her among one of the best moments of true happiness in my life. I remember that warm summer day fondly. It seems like a different reality from this dark, rainy, lonely place. I feel like I spent days sitting in that playground, much too old to play, just talking with her and hanging around doing nothing at all. I still feel like I can go back to that moment sometimes, and it reminds me that this damn place is not all there is. Finally, a knock at the door. I thought it was odd that I couldn't see her through the camera I hid between the two soda machines. I figured that it was bad positioning, like when I couldn't see out the front door. I should have known. After the knock, I yelled through the door jokingly that I had a camera between the soda machines because I was embarrassed myself that I had taken this paranoia so far. After I did that, I saw her image walk over to the camera and look down at it. She smiled and waved.
Hey!
She said to the camera, brightly. It's weird, I know. I said into the mic attached to my computer. I've had a weird few days.
Must have.
She replied.
Open the door, John.
I hesitated. How could I be sure? Hey, humour me a second here, I told her through the mic. Tell me one thing about us, just to prove to me you're you. She gave the camera a weird look.
Alright.
She said slowly, thinking.
We met randomly at a playground when we were both way too old to be there.
I sighed deeply as reality returned and fear faded. God, I've been so ridiculous. Of course it was Amy. That day wasn't anywhere in the world except in my memory. I've never mentioned it to anyone, not out of embarrassment, but out of a strange secret nostalgia and a longing for those days to return. If there was some unknown force at work trying to trick me, as I feared, there was no way they could know about that day. Alright, I'll explain everything, I told her. I'll be right there. I ran to my small bathroom and fixed my hair as best I could. I looked like hell, but she would understand. Snickering at my own unbelievable behaviour and the mess I'd made of the place, I walked to the door. I put my hand on the doorknob and gave the mess one last look. So ridiculous, I thought. My eyes traced over the half-eaten food lying on the ground, the overflowing trash bin, and the bed I tipped to the side looking for God knows what. I almost turned to the door and opened it, but my eyes fell on one last thing. The old webcam, the one I used for that eerily vacant chat with my friend. Its silent black sphere lay haphazardly tossed to the side, its lens pointed at the table where this journal lay. An overwhelming terror took me as I realised that if something could see through that camera, it would have seen what I wrote about that day. I asked her for one thing about us, and she chose the only thing in the world that I thought they, or it, did know. But it did know. It could have been watching me the whole time. I didn't open the door. I screamed in uncontrollable terror. I stomped on the old webcam on the floor. The door shook and the doorknob tried to turn, but I didn't hear Amy's voice through the door. Was the basement door made to keep out drafts? Too thick? Or was Amy not outside? What could have been trying to get in, if not her? What the hell is out there? I saw her on my computer, through the camera outside. I heard her on the speakers through the camera outside. But was it real? How could I know? She's gone now. I screamed and shouted for help. I piled up everything in my apartment against the front door.
Friday.
At least, I think it's Friday. I broke everything electronic. I smashed my computer to pieces. Every single thing on there could have been accessed by network access, or worse, altered. I'm a programmer, I know. Every little piece of information I gave out since this started, my name, my email, my location, none of it came from outside until I gave it out. I've been going over and over and over what I wrote. I've been pacing back and forth, alternating between stark terror and overpowering disbelief. Sometimes I'm absolutely certain some phantom entity is dead set on the simple goal of getting me to go outside. Back to the beginning, with the phone call with Amy. She was effectively asking me to open the door and go outside. I keep running it all through my head. One point of view says I've acted like a madman, and all of this is the extreme convergence of probability. Never going outside at the right times, by pure luck. Never seeing another person, by pure chance. Getting a random nonsense email from some computer virus, at just the right time. The other point of view says the extreme convergence of probability is the reason that whatever's out there hasn't gotten me already. I keep thinking, I never opened the window on the 3rd floor. I never opened the front door until that incredibly stupid stunt with the hidden camera, after which I ran straight to my room and slammed the door. I haven't opened my own solid door since I flung open the front door of the building. Whatever's out there, if anything's out there, never made an appearance in the building before I opened the front door. Maybe the reason it wasn't in the building already was that it was also elsewhere getting everyone else. And then it waited until I betrayed my existence by trying to call Amy. A call which didn't work. until it called me and asked for my name. Terror literally overwhelms me every time I try and fit the pieces of this nightmare together. That email, short, cut off, was it from someone trying to get word out? Some friendly voice desperately trying to warn me before it came? Seen with my own eyes. Don't trust them. Exactly what I've been so suspicious of. It could have masterful control of all things electronic, practicing its insidious deception to trick me into coming outside. Why can't it get in? It knocked on the door. It must have some solid presence. The door. The image of those doors in the upper hallway as guardian monoliths flashes back in my mind every time I trace the path of my thoughts. If there is some phantom entity trying to get me to go outside, maybe it can't go through doors. I keep thinking back over all the books I've read, or movies I've seen, trying to generate some explanation for this. Doors have always played on a human imagination, always seen as wards or portals of special importance. Or perhaps the door is just too thick. I know that I couldn't bash through any of the doors in this building, let alone the heavy basement ones. Aside from that, the real question is, why does it even want me? If it just wanted to kill me, it could do me in any number of ways, including just waiting till I starve to death. What if it doesn't want to kill me? What if it has some far more horrific fate in store for me? God, what can I do to escape this nightmare? I knock on the door. I told the people on the other side of the door I need a minute to think and I'll come out. I'm really just writing this down so I can figure out what to do. At least this time I hear their voices. My paranoia, and yes, I recognise I'm being paranoid, has me thinking of all sorts of ways their voices could be faked electronically. There could be nothing but speakers outside, simulating human voices. Did it really take them 3 days to come to talk to me? Amy is supposedly out there, along with 2 policemen and a psychiatrist. Maybe it took them 3 days to think of what to say to me. The psychiatrist's claim could be pretty convincing if I decided to think this has all been some crazy misunderstanding and not some entity trying to trick me into opening the door. The psychiatrist has an older voice, authoritarian, but still caring. I liked it. I'm desperate just to see someone with my own eyes. He said I have something called cyberpsychosis, and I'm just one of a nationwide epidemic of thousands of people having breakdowns, triggered by a suggestive email that somehow got through. I swear he said got through somehow. I don't know. I think he means spread throughout the country inexplicably, but I'm incredibly suspicious that the entity slipped up and revealed something. He said I'm a part of a wave of emergent behaviour, that a lot of other people are having the same problem, with the same fears, even though we've never communicated. That neatly explains the strange email about eyes I got. I didn't get the original triggering email. I got a descendant of it. My friend could have broken down too, and tried to warn everyone he knows against his paranoid fears. That's how the problem spreads, the psychiatrist claims. I could have spread it too, with my texts and instant messages to online to everyone I know. One of those people might be melting down right now, after being triggered by something I sent them. Something they might interpret any way they want. Something like a text saying seen anyone face to face recently. The psychiatrist told me that he didn't want me to lose yet another one, that people like me are intelligent, and that's our downfall. We draw connections so well that we draw them even when they shouldn't be there. He said it's easy to get caught up in paranoia in our fast-paced world, a constantly changing place where more and more of our interaction is simulated. I have to give him one thing. It's a great explanation. It neatly explains everything. It perfectly explains everything, in fact. I have every reason to shake off this nightmarish fear that something or some consciousness or being out there wants me to open the door so it can capture me for some horrible fate worse than death. It would be foolish, after hearing that explanation, to stay in here until I starve to death just to spite the entity that might have got everyone else. It'd be foolish to think that, after hearing that explanation. I might be one of the last people left alive on an empty world, hiding in my secure basement room, spitting some unthinkable deceptive entity just by refusing to be captured. It's a perfect explanation for every single strange thing I've heard or seen, and I have every reason in the world to let all of my fears go and open the door. And that is exactly why I'm not going to. How can I be sure? How can I know what's real and what's deception? All of these damn things with their wires and their signals that originate from unseen origins, they're not real. I can't be sure. Signals for a camera, faked videos, deceptive phone calls, emails, even the television, lying broken on the floor. How can I possibly know it's real? It's just signals, waves, light. The door, it's bashing on the door, it's trying to get in. What insane mechanical device could it be using to simulate the sound of men attacking the heavy wood so well? At least I can finally see it with my own eyes. There's nothing left in here for it to deceive me with. I've ripped apart everything else. It can't deceive my eyes. Can it? Seen with your own eyes. Don't trust them. Wait. Was that desperate message trying to tell me to trust my own eyes? Or warning me about my eyes too? Oh God. What's the difference between a camera and my eyes? They both turn light into electrical signals. They're the same. I can't be deceived. I have to be sure. I have to be sure.
Dates unknown.
I calmly asked for paper and a pen, day in and day out, until it finally gave them to me. Not that it matters. What am I going to do? Poke my eyes out? The bandages feel like a part of me now. The pain is gone. I figured this would be one of my last chances to write legibly, as, without my sight to correct my mistakes, my hands will slowly forget the motions involved. This is a sort of self-indulgence, this writing. It's a relic of another time, because I'm certain everyone left in the world is dead, or something far worse. I sit against a padded wall, day in and day out. The entity brings me food and water. It masks itself as a kind nurse, as an unsympathetic doctor. I think it knows that my hearing has sharpened considerably now that I live in the darkness. It fakes conversations in the hallway on the off chance that I might overhear. One of the nurses talks about having a baby soon. One of the doctors lost his wife in a car accident. None of it matters. None of it is real. None of it gets to me. Not like she does. That's the worst part. The part I almost can't handle. The thing comes to me, masquerading as Amy. Its recreation is perfect. It sounds exactly like Amy. Feels exactly like her. It even produces realistic tears and looks lifelike on her cheeks. When it first dragged me here, it told me all of the things I wanted to hear. It told me that she loved me, that she's always loved me, that it didn't understand why I did this, that we could still have a life together, if only I would stop insisting that I was being deceived. It wanted me to believe, no. It needed me to believe that she was real. And I almost fell for it. I really did. I doubted myself for the longest time. In the end though, it was all too perfect, too flawless, and too real. The false Amy used to come here every day, and then every week, and finally stopped coming altogether. But I don't think the entity will give up. I think the waiting game is just another one of its gambits. I will resist for the rest of my life if I have to. I don't know what happened to the rest of the world, but I do know that this thing needs me to fall for its deceptions. If it needs that, then maybe, just maybe, I'm a thorn in its agenda. Maybe Amy is still alive out there somewhere, kept alive only by my will to resist the deceiver. I hold on to that hope, rocking back and forth in my cell to pass the time. I will never give in. I will never break. I am a hero. The doctor read the paper the patient had scribbled on. It was barely readable, written in the shaky script of one who could not see. He wanted to smile at the man's steadfast resolve, a reminder of the human will to survive. but he knew that the patient was completely delusional. After all, a sane man would have fallen for the deception long ago. The doctor wanted to smile. He wanted to whisper words of encouragement to the delusional man. He wanted to scream, but the nerve wrapped around his head and into his eyes made him do otherwise. His body walked into a cell like a puppet and told the patient once more that he was wrong and nobody was trying to deceive him. Payphones have nearly become extinct in this day and age, gone the way of VHS tapes and keeping your dinner to yourself rather than sharing it via social media with thousands of others. So when you see one of these rare structures from a simpler past, most often worn away by the elements and stained with graffiti and dirty advertisements, you often think, who, bar homeless people checking for change or embarrassed men wanting a number for a busty escort, uses these anymore? It was on my way home from finishing a shift at a very budget version of KFC that I noticed one. I had taken that same route home most days for the last 3 years and had never even registered it being there. But on a slightly colder than usual night in September, as a misty rain started to blur the vision on my glasses, there it was, the solitary phone box. Not decorated with the average drawn on penises and cuss words, but dishevelled and emballed with black grime nonetheless. I started to walk on, unfazed by the outdated mystery box that had passed by me for years, until it rang. Why did I answer? I don't know. Call it a man's innate curiosity, but something got the better of me. Who the hell was calling a random British small town payphone at 11:07 at night? Was it one of those pre-recorded cold calls? Or was it something far more bizarre? For a 22-year-old fried chicken shop worker, life wasn't all that exciting, so picking up the receiver to make a Tuesday night a little more interesting was on the cards for me. "Well, good evening," I answered cockily and confidently, just in case by a stroke of luck that it was one of these filthy chat-up lines. Crackling, wind, static, maybe a woman's breathing. The connection was too bad to tell. I put the phone down and made my way back to my one-bedroom flat. It rang again. Once more, I thought. I really had very little going on at home that night. "Hello, it's Jamie speaking. How can I be of assistance?" I answered.
Oh, hi. Sorry about the last call. The signal's really bad here.
A girl. An American girl. What sounded like a cute American girl. No problem. So, what's up?" I said, for some reason, my internal voice reminding me while I'm still fucking single.
Nothing much. Just bored. You said your name was Jamie, right? I'm Charlotte. Great to meet. Well, not really meet, but great to talk to you.
The voice at the other end of the line stated gleefully, the crackling and the wind still slightly present in the background. Same to you, I guess. Just one question though. Why the hell are you calling this payphone?
Silly me. Here I am just bursting into conversation. Of course you'd think this is weird. Some unknown girl just calling you up in the middle of the night. Oh, is it night where you are? It's always dark here, so I just presume it is everywhere.
The American girl replied. Yeah, it's night.
Lucky guess. Well, I didn't really know who I was calling. I just pressed the emergency button on this payphone on my end, and here I am talking with you.
Wait, you said emergency? Are you okay? Do you need help?
A little bit, yeah.
What's wrong?
I'm dead.
My night just got interesting. Like, are you meaning the slang word, Instagram, hashtag Starbucks drinking white girl kind of dead? Or literally dead, as in your heart stopped beating?
You're so funny. The second one. I'm literally dead.
I mean, I'd have rather have went with the "what are you wearing" line, but a conversation with a dead girl was better than no conversation at all, so I played along. So, what does being dead feel like?
I've got to be honest with you. It's not great. It's obviously a bit cold, but my skin doesn't feel like ice. It just feels like concrete.
She said, her voice lost all its positivity.
All my joints can move, but it feels like if I move too fast, I'll start crumbling. It's also really hard to breathe. Like I can breathe, but every breath is so small and sharp that I'm never satisfied. It always feels like it needs to be deeper, but my lungs just can't do it.
Jesus, I was hoping for a bit of a joke answer, not an actual dead serious description. Anyway, how'd you die?
I slipped my wrists in a bath, but I can't remember why I did it. I don't think I wanted to die.
Okay, well, I'm even more flaccid than when this conversation began. Thanks for making my night slightly more intriguing, but Pornhub awaits me.
No, you can't go.
An anger now emanated from the receiver, which when I think about it, should have been fear. And why's that?
Because you can help me, and I can help you.
What could I possibly get from a dead girl, apart from a couple of years in a mental hospital for necrophilia?
I can give you a message. Don't you want to hear from that couple you ran over and left to die?
A lump the size of a heavyweight boxer's fist filled my throat. The moisture from my tongue disappeared, and the unnatural chill that first filled the phone box was replaced with a sauna level of nervous heat. Who the fuck is this? I managed to stutter.
Don't be afraid. The dead just know things. They're here with me. They want you to know something.
You fucking listen to me, you creepy little cunt. I don't know who the fuck you think you are, but I'm gonna find you and end you.
Just like you did them.
No one knew that. No one could possibly know that. I never told anyone about them.
They're not mad that you didn't turn back and help them. They know you were scared and have been sad ever since. But they've got a secret to make you happy, Jamie. That's what you want, isn't it? To be happy. To not work late nights in a greasy takeaway, bored out of your mind, only to return home and jack yourself to sleep.
I wanted so hard to put the phone down then, to run, to hide, but as frozen as I was with fear, the curiosity grew in me. What if I was really in contact with the beyond? What if this mysterious phone box, that maybe did just appear from nowhere, did connect me with the other side? And if the dead did have the power to contact the living, what secrets could they bestow upon me? Where are you, so we can talk face to face?
You wouldn't like it here, Jamie. It's awfully cold and doesn't really make sense whatsoever. It's just a long, crooked road with a dim light at the end. Kinda like when the sun's just about to set over the horizon, except it's more red than a burning orange. But anyway, listen to me go on about the landscape of the afterlife like I have all the time in the world.
You don't have all the time in the world? I asked, puzzled about the rules of death.
No, you see, you're my one phone call. My one phone call that could bring me back to life.
Bring you back to life? And how exactly would that work?
All I need is some blood, Jamie. Just a few drops of blood to replace some of mine that I lost when I took my own life.
Charlotte's voice had a sense of desperation about it. I heard it in the obese people that came in the chicken shop, ravaging with hunger, over-ordering as they bulged over the counter. So, do I mail it to you? Go to the nearest pet cemetery? What's the process for this, lady?
Just cut your hand open and put it to the receiver. I'll get it, don't worry.
And then you'll tell me the secrets?
Yes, you'll know everything I know.
I took my pocket knife from my work bag and ran it through my hand without hesitation and pressed my bleeding palm to the bottom of the phone. The pain not really bothering me due to the absurd situation that I was in, but catching a venereal disease from the sticky receiver did cross my mind. I held it there for 30 seconds, not really knowing how long it took for blood to seep through to wherever the hell this girl was, and then brought it back to my ear. Hello? Did that get you? Has it worked? A laugh arose through the line. It didn't sound like the dead girl. It didn't sound like anything I'd ever heard before. It was a mixture of hysterics and pure agony that sounded like it came from so many people, but it all joined together in this one choreographed barrel of shrill laughter.
I haven't been completely truthful with you, Jamie.
The deceased chick's voice said, now back to her normal tone, like that chorus of laughter never happened.
I am dead, of course. That's not a lie. But there's no secrets I can tell you.
You fucking bitch! I roared, embarrassed that I'd fell for such a bullshit idea. I dropped the phone, leaving it swinging as I went to push the door to exit the box, but it didn't budge. I put my shoulder into it, not caring if I smashed the glass in my efforts. But still, nothing. I returned to the phone. What? How the hell do I get out of here?
Aren't you wondering why I killed myself, Jamie?
While I pondered her question, I noticed that the blood was still pouring from my hand, but instead of hitting the floor as gravity would intend it to, it was floating upwards towards the roof of the phone box to create an upside down puddle of deep red.
Well, after you killed my parents drunk driving, I was handed off to my uncle, who didn't treat me very nicely. Let's just put it like that. The children at the school called me an orphan girl. This, teamed up with my so-called uncle's advances towards me, didn't do any good for my mental health.
I was feeling lightheaded now. The blood was gushing out of me like a vacuum cleaner, sucking it all out. It was now slowly starting to cover the windows of the phone box, blocking my view of the outside world.
That's why I decided to cut my wrists. But as soon as I lost blood in the bath and my eyes started to flutter, I realised I didn't really want to die, which is when my parents met me on the other side. They wanted me to live too, and they told me a way I could live. The dead do really know things, Jamie, and all you're going to find is so interesting being dead.
She exclaimed, with a joy filling her voice. How can you live? I managed to whisper, my legs becoming weaker with every word I said.
If I could find someone undeserving of life and willingly get them to offer blood to me to replace the blood I lost, then I could return. My parents told me of you, how you knocked them over while you were blind drunk and left them to die while they were on vacation in your country. It was a tough call whether to bleed you or my rapist uncle dry, but I figured I could take care of him once I'm back in my body. Because if you've taught me anything, Jamie, it's easy to get away with murder.
I fell to the floor, only just clinging onto the phone. Charlotte's voice had now disappeared, replaced with that choir of deafening laughter from beyond the grave, singing me to sleep as my eyes began to shut for the last time, surrounded by my own blood that now had consumed the phone box completely. My breath got short, my skin felt hard. As soon as I found the slightest strength to open my eyelids, I saw a dim glow of light that was neither the rising or setting of the sun, but of something morbid that filled my non-beating heart with a sinking lack of faith. I was dead. So here I am, posting this story online, from the other side, on my phone. I'm glad I've got your attention, because it's true. The dead do know things, and I know what you have done. I've gotten so lonely here on the dark road, but now that you've heard this, and I'm in your head, I can't wait for you to join me. After all, we both know you deserve to be here. We'd all liked Mr. Winscott. He didn't mind when we used the sledding hill on his property, and he always gave out the best Halloween candy in the neighbourhood. So when we heard he'd been taken by the tall man, everyone was really bummed out. You wouldn't have heard of the tall man, so let me explain. Tall man has been a legend in my town for decades. Those who claim to have seen him say that he's over 9 foot tall, skinny and pale, with an exceedingly polite smile. My dad told me that Tall Man is a collector. He likes things. Dad said his favourite things to take are sad people, empty buildings and dreams. I have to admit, he's stolen away my dreams more than a few times. When Mr. Winscott didn't show up for church on Sunday, nobody thought it was weird. Then when Monday rolled around and he wasn't at work with my dad, people started to whisper. My parents thought it was odd, but not particularly concerning. But then the rumours started that Tall Man had gotten him. A kid in my class even said that he had seen Tall Man in Mr. Winscott's house through a window. I told my parents what Jake had seen, but they only laughed. Tyler and I biked by Mr. Winscott's place every day after school to get to our friend Rory's house. We never stopped in front of Mr. Winscott's to try and see Tall Man through the windows like Jake had. We never even slowed down. But one day we played too late at Rory's. Since we didn't want to bike home in the dark, we called our parents and asked to sleep over. Tyler was allowed to. I wasn't. I tried really hard not to look as I biked by Mr. Winscott's cul-de-sac. I almost made it, but my curiosity forced a backwards glance at the house. The lights were all on, and my eyes were drawn to the face in the window immediately. I saw Tall Man looking back at me. I choked in a panicked breath, and my foot missed the pedal as I tried to speed away on my bike. I stumbled, for only a second, my eyes never leaving the face in the window, before pedalling home as fast as I could. The next morning at school, I told Rory and Tyler about Tall Man. They didn't believe me, of course. They hadn't believed Jake either. I knew I had to show them, otherwise they would think I was a liar. We waited until dark and then biked to Mr. Winscott's cul-de-sac. Tall Man was there, as I told them he'd be, watching us from the window above the front door. It was such a tall front door that I thought Tall Man must have been 10 feet high to see out of the window above it. He was almost smiling, but his expression betrayed a certain displeasure. Tyler fell off his bike. "Holy shit, run!" And we did. As soon as we cleared the cul-de-sac, we all began talking over each other in a flustered panic. "I can't believe we saw Tall Man. Did you see the look on his face? We have to tell the cops." We went back the next morning with more friends, but Tall Man was gone. We went back the day after, but again, we could see no one behind the window. We began to wonder if Tall Man only came out at night. A few nights later, as we sat in Rory's basement waiting for pizza to arrive, we decided to sneak out and see if our theory was true. We quietly rolled our bikes down the driveway and into the street. We took off for Mr. Winscott's house, torn between hoping Tall Man was there and praying that he wasn't. We saw him as soon as we biked into the cul-de-sac. He was still standing there after all, and this time he was outright frowning. He's mad," Rory said. "He wants us to stay away. I don't get why he only comes out at night," Tyler said while he snapped a picture. "Don't," I hissed. "Stop taking pictures, you'll make him madder. Maybe he watches us in the daytime too," Rory shrugged. "Maybe we can only see him at night, because that's when the porch light comes on and shines in the window." It was a chilling thought. We decided to test Rory's theory the following Saturday, emboldened by the assumption that Tall Man could only watch us, but never come out. As soon as the sun came up that morning, we biked to Mr. Winscott's. We had to get close, almost all the way to the beginning of his driveway, but Tyler swore he saw Tall Man standing in the window. I made hand binoculars and squinted at the window for a few minutes before Tyler suddenly said, "Let's go," hopped back on his bike and pedalled off. We caught up to him a few blocks later. "What the hell was that?" I said. It was Tall Man was there, but he looked different this time." "Like how?" Rory asked. I don't know. He looked angry or just wrong somehow." It was days before we could convince Tyler to go back into Tall Man's house, and even then he insisted on taking his teenage brother Matt with us. Matt wasn't impressed with our stories at all. He didn't believe us, but he came anyway, for Tyler's sake. As soon as we got close enough to see Tall Man in the window above the door, Matt got off his bike. He stared and squinted and stared some more. He got close, closer than we'd ever dared to go at night. We followed, nervously, behind him. Matt walked up to the driveway and then down the stone path towards the front porch. We dared not follow that far. Then Matt went up the porch stairs, right up to the door. "Holy fuck," he said. Then a few more four-letter words, and suddenly Matt was running down the front porch, down the path, down the driveway, and into the street where we waited. "What is it?" Tyler asked him. "There is no Tall Man," he said, out of breath. "Call the cops, now." And he was right. It wasn't Tall Man after all. We stayed long enough to watch the police break down the door and cut the rotting corpse of Mr. Winscott from the ceiling where he'd hung himself from a lamp fixture in his foyer. The body had decayed as if it was melting in the days where we had watched it from the road. Mr. Winscott had written no note and made no goodbyes, leaving behind only the sad imprint of a divorced, middle-aged man suffering a sad, well-hidden depression. It was weeks before the town lost interest in the tragic suicide, and months before kids stopped asking us to describe the body in all the glory of its detail. Eventually, even Tyler and Rory stopped talking about it. Everyone had moved on. Everyone, except me. See, there was one detail that always bothered me. One thing I never told Rory or Tyler. It was about the first time I'd seen Tall Man, the time I'd been alone. The thing was, I had seen Mr. Winscott that night. He'd been sitting alone in his kitchen, eating dinner. But I'd seen something else too. In the bedroom window, there'd been an impossibly tall, impossibly pale man staring back at me. And he'd been politely smiling. Cryptozoology has always been a minor interest of mine. I say minor because it was something I only enjoy casually. A few internet articles here and there, scrolling through a couple of pages on a Tumblr blog dedicated to it, maybe watching one of those Bigfoot documentaries. You know, that kind of interest. Nothing serious. Generally, that'd be pretty common for most people. Most people, however, do not live in my little town, where a supposed cryptid is how many folks here make a living. See, I live in a small town in the UK, more specifically in the northwest of England. It's a tiny place, not many people outside of the country have likely heard of, unless they've already been there for whatever reason or have an interest in cryptids. My small town is situated by one of the many lakes that dot that part of the country, and as many bodies of water do, we have our own Loch Ness Monster. So many people claim, anyway. I'm sure many of you are sceptical of that, as you are of any such monster. Who can blame you? I grew up here, and I didn't buy into it either. I found it interesting, sure, but I didn't believe it. Same as I didn't believe those people who claim aliens probed their backsides or that Bigfoot had destroyed their camp. It was something to read about and enjoy, but not something I believed in. Most of my generation and that of my parents felt the same, but many of my grandparents' era clung to the belief in that monster. They stayed away from the lake unless they were in decently sized boats or one of the many ferries that travelled the length of the lake to nearby settlements. Not us kids and teens though, especially not in the summer. Most of the time British summers are nothing to brag about. They're pretty warm, sure, but usually cloudy or wet. Sometimes, however, we're blessed with a heat wave. Nothing was better than a dip in the lake during that heat. During the school holidays, the older kids would hang out by the lake well into the evening. The worst thing that would ever happen is someone would get cramp while swimming and we'd have to drag them back to shore. Or someone would get their foot tangled in some lake weed and freak out until they realised what it actually was. Nothing sinister, nothing serious. Most certainly, no lake monster. One particular day during the Easter break, where it was much too cold to spend more than 5 minutes at a time in the lake, I was spending my time climbing the many tall trees that covered the areas around the lakes. Maybe I was a bit too old for tree climbing, most likely, but it'd always been something I'd enjoyed doing. Something about climbing as high as I could go and settling down on a sturdy branch, just overlooking my surroundings, was something that I enjoyed. Most of the time I'd just watch the boats going up and down the lake, people going about their business, cars passing down the country roads. Just typical stuff, nothing worthy of merit. But this day in spring, was completely different. The day itself was like any other, a chilly but sunny day in late March. I'd already taken up my temporary church in an old oak, where I'd stay for an hour or so before going to meet some friends. From where I was perched I could see 2 young kids, maybe 8 or 9, playing down by the shore. They weren't close to the water, just sitting in the grassy area a little ways off the bank. 2 girls. I couldn't really see what they were doing beyond that general observation. This was nothing out of the ordinary. What was unusual was the large, grey horse trotting along the shoreline towards them. Horses weren't exactly an unusual sight themselves out in a rural town, but they were usually in their fields or accompanied by a rider. There was no one else in sight, and this horse had no saddle or any other type of riding equipment. There are no true wild horses in the United Kingdom. Only the semi-wild horses make their home in the New Forest, somewhere right at the other side of the country. Tourists were always crossing through the private island and leaving gates open. Animals were bound to get out on occasion. The kids took immediate notice of the animal, looking up from their chatter and letting out delightful squeals. I could hear them up from my spot on the tree. I watched as they ran up to it, fearless, as all children were, oblivious to the fact that if they spooked it, One kick from its front or back legs could shatter their developing bones. I watched as the pair gleefully pet the animal. The horse itself didn't seem to mind the attention, which led me to believe it was frequently used for riding, most likely one of the horses rented out to the tourists so they could enjoy a ride through the countryside. The horse lowered its head, allowing one of the kids to press a hand onto its muzzle. I could hear their delightful laughter as the pair took turns alternating between stroking its flank and head. It was pretty cute, I have to admit. There's always something magical about an unfamiliar animal being content with your presence. With how calm this horse seemed to be, I didn't bat an eye as it lowered itself to the ground. The pair of kids seemed ecstatic about this, climbing onto the animal's back. Not exactly safe or smart, but kids don't really think like that. And I'm sure the horse would have made it very clear that it didn't want them climbing all over it if it wanted to. It was a pretty big horse. It took me a few moments to realise the children were no longer letting out happy squeals and giggles. They were screaming. I couldn't understand why at first, but as my vision focused more on the horse, I knew. How I hadn't noticed the change, I don't know. But where once it had been dappled grey, it was now black. The kind of black that seems to absorb all the light around it, distorting it. It seemed to be dripping wet. Even from my spot in the tree, I could see the tangled mess of its waterlogged mane and tail leaking water onto the ground. Its eyes were the worst of it. I shouldn't have been able to see them this clearly from such a distance. But even in the dull spring sun, I could see the glowing from these sickening, milky eyes. It threw its head back, rising to its feet with the children still on its back. They were trying to get off, but they couldn't do it. I don't know how, and I'm sure they didn't know how either. But no matter how much they struggled and screamed, they couldn't get off that damn horse. It was like they were super glued to it. I couldn't move from my spot, no matter how much my mind screamed at me to jump down and do something, anything. I'm ashamed to admit fear consumed me. Sweat dripped down my brow as my breathing grew more rapid by the second. My heart was beating so hard and so fast that it hurt. I have no proper words to describe the primal terror that gripped me. The same terror I imagine gripped our ancestors when confronted by a giant cave bear or an angry mammoth. Though where their flight or fight instinct would have kicked in, mine didn't. I was simply frozen. Frozen as the beast charged towards the water, screaming children on its back, their cries not silenced until their heads dipped under the water. Water that frothed and bubbled as they struggled beneath the surface. Then, nothing. Just an eerie stillness on that spring morning. Not even the birds sang. I think they knew. Animals just know these kind of things. I don't know how long I sat up in that tree just staring over the water where that horse had vanished into the murk. I don't know what became of those kids, but I know they were never found, and that they never will be. It was written off as an accidental drowning. Their parents beat themselves up over it, as any parent would. Nothing like this had ever happened before in our little community. Kids who grew up around the lake pretty much knew how to swim by the time they could walk, and they knew to be careful in the water. It didn't add up, of course, but beyond that, no one could explain it. I think the parents cling to the hope that their children simply ran away or were kidnapped, so that one day they might be able to find them again. And I can't blame them for that. I never told anyone what I saw. No one would have believed me anyway, save for a few ancient crones that nobody ever took seriously, who frequently babbled about ghosts and ghouls. It haunts me that I did nothing, that I simply watched as those innocent children were pulled into the watery grave. I never went into that lake after that. To anyone that asked, I simply said that I didn't like the way the smell of the lake water clung to me. I didn't think I'd ever tell this story, but I still live in this town over a decade later, and last night I saw a grey horse stalking along the lakeside. This incident happened to me last year on Halloween. My little brother and I were home alone, since our parents had gone out to a Halloween party. They had tasked us with handing out candy to the trick-or-treaters. This bummed my brother and I out, because we had made plans to go trick-or-treating with a few friends. Our parents told us that we were too old to still be trick-or-treating, and that we could instead invite our friends over to the house and hang out there. My friends declined my invitation to come over, because they still wanted to go out trick-or-treating. So that left me home alone with my brother, handing out candy. A lot of people stopped by our house, and by 10 PM almost all candy was gone. My brother and I decided that we'd eat the rest. We were sitting on the couch, watching a scary movie, stuffing ourselves with candy, and then there was a knock at the door. I stormed off of the sofa, wondering who the fuck could be knocking at our door at this hour. I assumed that it was just some late night trick-or-treaters. Even if that was the case, I had turned the porch light and Halloween decorations off, which should have been a dead giveaway that we weren't giving out any more candy, or that we weren't home. So I assumed it was just my parents. Being cautious, I looked through the peephole and saw a suspicious man standing on our front porch. He was wearing a black hoodie with the hood over his head, which made it difficult to see his face. The only detail I could spot was that he had a beard and dry, crusty lips. There was no way that this guy was a trick-or-treater, because he wasn't wearing a costume, and was far too old to be trick-or-treating alone. His hands were stuffed in his front pockets of his hoodie, and he also looked very thin. Every single red flag went off in my head about this guy. There was no way in hell I was going to open the door. Still looking through the peephole, I watched as he knocked on the door again. He seemed desperate for us to open up, and was shaking a bit. It wasn't cold outside, definitely not cold enough for someone to be trembling. He was giving me a bad vibe, and I wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. "We're out of candy," I shouted to him. I watched as a smile spread across his face. It wasn't a friendly smile either.
Are you alone in there?
The man asked, almost in a mocking voice. His voice was raspy and dry. "Should I call the police?" My little brother asked me, quietly, gripping his cell phone. The man let out a low grumble and said,
Sounds like you're not alone in there.
I continued to watch him through the peephole. His hands were still wedged tightly in his pocket, and he was still shaking a bit. I began to wonder if he was armed. I decided to take action, and spoke to him in the most intimidating voice I could. "Get the fuck away from my house, or I'll call the police," I shouted. His smile faded, and he bared his teeth. His teeth were piss yellow, and I concluded that he was probably some homeless crackhead. He had a look of fury plastered on his face. Fortunately, he left without trying to break in, probably because he knew I wasn't fucking around. I didn't stop watching him through the peephole though, until I saw him completely off of our property. My brother and I breathed a sigh of relief and decided not to call the police. We were a bit paranoid after this, and watched TV until our parents came home. We didn't tell them about the man, since he hadn't really tried to harm us. Now when I think back to this, I wish we'd called the police, because maybe we would have been able to prevent a murder. You see, the next day we found out that the elderly woman who lived a few houses down from us had been brutally murdered. Her neighbour had found her lying on the front porch, covered in blood. She'd been stabbed multiple times in the chest and neck. My brother and I immediately knew who had done it, and we told the police what we saw. They couldn't do much from the information we had given them, since we hadn't really seen many details of his face. They went on a hunt for the man, but to my knowledge, never caught him. I blame myself for that poor lady's murder, because I could have prevented it from happening just by calling the police. I think the most disturbing thing of all of this is the fact that he didn't take anything from the old lady's house. Her home was left untouched, but he could have gone in and taken what he wanted since the door was wide open. This means all he wanted to do was kill. That was his only intention. He didn't want money or jewellery. He only had the urge to murder. So, to the creepy crackhead Halloween slasher, let's not meet. I'm studying abroad, as well as my flatmates here, so we're fairly unfamiliar with the city we're in. This happened a couple of weeks ago, on Halloween night. We'd gone out to some parties that night. I'd been drinking pretty consistently throughout. At about 4 AM, we finally decided to make our way back home. We're three just turned 20 girls in short dresses, and while my two flatmates were fairly drunk, I'd sobered up. Halloween is always a pretty sociable night, and we ended up meeting and joining various parties throughout. So at this point, we found ourselves about a 50-minute walk away from our flat in an area we barely knew. Fittingly, it was very quiet out and foggy as hell. I remember commenting to my friend how it felt like a shot in The Exorcist. We walked through empty back streets for a few minutes, eventually reaching a main road. Being the most sober of the lot, I was basically herding the others.
despite being equally as exhausted. That's not at the top of my game. After a few minutes of barely any cars passing, and what taxis we did see, they were occupied. My friend finally flagged one. British taxis tend to be black cabs, so they're easy to distinguish. This was just some random car, but it had the signature luminescent bar on top with taxi written on it, so I brushed it off. The driver put down the window and gruffly asked us where we were going. We replied with our address. He then asked us how much we were willing to pay, equally as gruffly. Even to my drunk friends, this was weird, but being one of those exceedingly friendly Americans, one kept talking to him. We were all tired after all, and wanted to get home. I was still uneasy though, as we're staying in a very friendly place, and any other taxi driver we had been really friendly, and always tried to wax poetic to the foreigners about the city. We were just about to get in, when I happened to look up at the glowing taxi sign, and noticed how distorted it was. Looking closer, I realised he had just spelled taxi in black tape across it. From afar, it looked legit. Plus, if you're driving around at night time on weekends, you don't expect your clientele to pay too much attention to this sort of thing. I quickly grabbed my mate's arm and pulled her away, telling her to look at the sign. At first, my friends didn't notice, but when they did, they freaked out. Realising this, he drove off real quick. An actual black cab passed not too long after this, so we got home safely, but we were pretty shaken. Due to the money question, he was probably just a dude trying to extort more cash out of drunk people with a fake taxi. But it could have been more sinister. We're young women after all, and you learn to be wary of almost any guy if you're alone late at night. I'm just relieved I happened to look closer, though I have no idea why I did. So, fake taxi driver on Halloween. Let's not meet again. This happened in 2001, on Halloween night to be specific. I was 7. If you want to know my current age, do the maths. My mum helped me to remember this one, so if there are any further questions, I'll ask her as she remembers the night vividly. It was freezing, probably within the 20 to 30 degree range. I was hell-bent on going out anyways. I wanted my pillowcase to be stocked full of sweets. I dressed as a cat, not too hard to imagine that. My mum noticed a very tall man dressed in black. My mum said he had black jeans on, black trench coat and a black hockey mask. He had no kids with him, so that was a huge red flag to my mother. But he did have a pumpkin basket to put candy in. He followed us around, house to house. Always stayed back 3 or 4 houses, according to my mum. After 20 or so minutes, she shrugged it off, thinking it was just some really tall kid innocently out trick-or-treating. But the more she said she kept shrugging it off, the more uneasy she became. Now I do remember my pillowcase was only half full, and my mum hurrying us home and being super pouty about it. I do not, however, remember my mum putting the house on lockdown after we got in the front door, but she remembers and says she did it very quickly. I ate some candy, brushed my teeth, got into bed. My mum laid down next to me. I remember this and thought it was a little weird since I was sleeping on my own at 7. Now this is where my mum's details really helped me out with the story, as I had no idea until we talked about it earlier. Fast forward to the morning, there was a pumpkin basket full of candy with a note on top that said meow in chicken scratch. On our front porch, right outside the front door, my mum threw out the candy in case it was tampered with, and she burned up the note. Now, what creeps me out is that in the middle of the night, she got up from my bed to recheck the house, looked out the window, and saw him, in our front lawn, staring at the house with the pumpkin basket in his hand. She didn't think he noticed her. She called the police immediately. She briefed the officer on what happened, and the officer said he'd do a few rounds and patrol the area. My mum never heard back from the police that night, or ever, she said. My mum also told me she stayed up the entire night with a pistol in her lap after seeing him in the front yard. Since that night, and up until right now, nothing weird with him has happened again. But as for his intentions, zero idea. So, creepy man dressed in black, let's not meet.
About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the United States. I've always been a night person,
so I'd often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police patrolled park quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man, dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass by me. But the closer he got, the more I realised how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky, and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still, until I could make out his face. His eyes were open and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward, a smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I'd put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he'd been standing, to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved, until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so I couldn't understand how he moved so fast. I was so shocked that I just stood there for some time, staring at him. And then he started moving towards me again. He took giant, exaggerated tiptoe steps, as if he was a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away, or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone, or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen, as the smiling man crept toward me, and then he stopped again, about a car length away from me. Still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the fuck do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone, but what actually came out was a whimper. What the fuck? Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling, and then, after what felt like forever, he turned around, very slowly, and started dance walking away. Just like that, not wanting to turn my back to him again, I watched him go, until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realised something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time, he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me, He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see. So this only happened yesterday, and it's been driving me crazy. So my husband and I are walking home from having a beer at a local pub around 6 p.m. In terms of setting the scene, we live in a small New Zealand town, population around 2,000 people. There's a real mixed bag in terms of residents. Older folk, meth heads, low income, but increasingly commuters from our capital city have been settling here. We fall into the latter category. It's spring, so there's still plenty of light, and we were just chatting as we walked the 10 minutes or so home. After about 3 minutes, at the first intersection on our walk, I spot a cat sitting on the fence of one of the corner houses on the other side of the street from us. I say meow, and it meows back. It then starts stalking a bird, so my husband and I continue watching this house, well, the cat really, as we walk past. Suddenly, a person with a brown paper bag on their head stumbles out of the front door of this house onto the yard. Their mannerisms and how they're moving are just so strange, but not what I'd associate with being drunk. The house itself seems completely dead, so there's no party on or anything. The person then turns to us and makes eye contact through the little slits in the paper bag. Then they start walking slowly backwards towards the front door and out of sight behind the alcove. We've been walking slowly this whole time. At this point I have literal goosebumps and an intense sense of dread. When I write it down, it sounds so silly, but there was something so creepy about this person. We're still looking as we walk past the house, and the paper bag face slowly emerges from the alcove, watching us before disappearing from view again. As we walk and get further and further away, we keep turning around to look, and the same thing happens over and over. Nothing. And then slowly, but surely, the paper bag face emerges to watch us. This continued until we were at the end of the street and round the corner out of sight. It still makes my skin crawl thinking about it. My husband laughed and said it's probably some kid getting ready for Halloween or just fucking with us. And he's probably right. But I had to keep turning around to watch my back during the rest of the walk home because I was just so creeped out. This happened maybe 10 years ago when I was back in my early 30s. I was standing in line at the local pharmacy to get my prescriptions. This is a small town and I'm a regular there, so they know me on sight. I was behind a couple of other people in line and there was a couple of people behind me. I kept feeling a tickle in my hair on the back of my head, but every time I looked behind me, the guy there was a few steps back and looking at the floor. This happened several times by the time I was at the front of the line. The pharmacist told me she wanted to talk to me about my medication in the consultation room. I thought this was weird, because we both knew I'd been on this medication for years, and probably would be for life. Nothing new. I get back to the room and close the door, and she comes in from the door at the other side that leads from the pharmacy. She told me that the man behind me had been stepping forward, sticking his nose in my hair, and smelling, before stepping back and looking at the floor. This shook me pretty badly, as it's understandably such weird behaviour, especially in my little town. The pharmacy staff insisted on having me wait there until the guy was distracted, and then the security guard would walk me to my car and watch me drive off, just to make sure I was gone before Hair Sniffer came out and saw I was driving off and what direction I was going. I still use this pharmacy, and some of the same people still work there. I'll always be grateful that they took the initiative to make sure I was safe that day. Ironically enough, it makes my hair stand on end just thinking about what could have happened if no one noticed him. I was working the closing shift at Footworks, the shoe store crammed into the far corner of the Chapel Hills Mall. Halloween was supposed to be a night of fun, but instead I was stuck stocking shelves full of sneakers for minimum wage. I only had half an hour left on my shift, and I could feel the seconds crawling by. The clock on my phone felt frozen at 7:30. I drummed my fingers on the counter, trying to stay awake. My manager, who was supposed to help close, had ducked out early for a smoke break and never came back. Most of the customers had already thinned out, but but there were still a few stragglers wandering around the mall. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my friend Ben. "Yo, you coming tonight or what?" I sighed. I'd been dodging the question all day. Ben's Halloween party was supposed to be the big event of the night. Half of the school was going, including all of my friends. But I hadn't planned on going to it. After my shift was over, all I really wanted to do was just crash in my bed. I started typing, probably not, when another text popped up. "Don't be lame, man. It's Halloween." I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the keyboard. It had been a while since I'd done anything fun, and even though I didn't have a costume, I could probably grab something cheap from the Halloween store on the way. I wasn't exactly Mr. Social, but maybe it wouldn't hurt to get out of the house every once in a while. "Yo!" A voice called from the store entrance, breaking my introspection. I looked up and saw Ben and Derek walking into the store like they owned the place. Ben flashed a grin, his hands stuffed in his pockets. "Come on, bro, you're not getting out of this one. You're coming tonight," Ben said, leaning against the counter. Derek nodded, smirking. "Yeah, man, you never come to anything. You didn't show up last year either." I started. "Look, I'm just tired, and I don't even have a costume. I don't even have time to..." "You've got time," Ben interrupted. "The party doesn't start till 10. Grab something cheap and just show up. It's not like you have anything better to do, man." I sighed. They weren't wrong. As much as I wanted to protest, I started giving in to the pressure. Ben raised an eyebrow, a smirk growing on his face, anticipating my answer. "Fine," I muttered. "I'll come, but I probably won't stay long." "Yes, there it is." Ben grinned, patting me on the shoulder. "You're gonna have a good time, mate, trust me." Derek glanced at his watch. "Alright, well, we'll be heading out. We'll see you there, yeah?" I watched them leave, their laughter fading as they disappeared out of the mall. I wasn't sure I believed Ben about having a good time, but I was locked in now. I just had to make it through the last stretch of my shift, grab a costume, and then down a few drinks to make the night more tolerable. The mall was basically empty now. Most of the other stores were closed, and the place began to get a little darker as more and more of the lights were turned off. I started mentally checking off the closing tasks: sweep the floor, cash out the register, routine shit. As I was counting the minutes to clock out, something caught my eye near the entrance. A person stood there, just outside the store, facing me. They were in a Halloween costume, a creepy red latex devil mask, which had a large pointy nose and a cartoonish wide smile which stretched ear to ear. Small black horns protruded from the top of the mask. It looked pretty realistic, like one of those expensive movie quality masks. Had it not been so startling, it would have actually been pretty impressive. The mask was paired with a mismatched black and red suit that looked like it was put together from pieces found at a thrift store. At first, I assumed it was just a last-minute shopper, or somebody probably killing time before heading to a party. But they stood completely still, facing me, not moving, not browsing, not shopping, just standing there. I felt my chest tighten. There was no reason to be freaked out by some weirdo in a Halloween costume, but something about them just made my hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The way they were just standing still, watching me, began to eat away at my nerves. I was about to tell him that we're closed, but he turned, slowly, deliberately, and walked away. I just stared, frozen in place. His steps were slow, measured, almost robotic, as he disappeared out of sight. I exhaled, realising I'd been holding my breath the entire time. What the fuck was that all about, I thought. Just some creep messing around, probably. It was Halloween after all. I shook it off, trying to refocus on closing the store and getting the fuck out of here. But every few seconds, I found myself glancing towards the entrance, half expecting to see that creepy guy in a devil mask there, watching me. By the time I finally clocked out, I was beat and my nerves were shot. I'd made my way out of the now empty mall toward my car, checking behind my shoulder every few seconds. I safely made it to my car, now fully convinced that the person, whoever it was simply messing with me. I brushed off the feeling and headed to the Halloween store to pick up a costume for the party. The Halloween store was one of those pop-up stores that showed up every year, taking over abandoned sporting goods stores and the like. I pushed open the door and stepped inside, a chime ringing loudly in a nearly empty store. The place was a mess. Shelves were mostly empty now, and the decorations were scattered all over the floor, with a few straggling shoppers picking up the scraps. The sound of Halloween music played faintly through the speakers. I wandered aimlessly, searching for any scraps of a costume. The aisles were nearly bare, but I kept looking, feeling the pressure of time build. Suddenly, the music cut off, leaving the store in an uncomfortable silence. I knew I didn't have much time before they closed, so I hurried, eyes darting over the shelves. The door chimed again. Someone else had come in, but I didn't bother to look. I was too focused. At the end of one aisle, I found a rack of cheap knockoff masks of famous movie characters. I grabbed a plastic Jason-style mask and headed for the register, rushing to get out. As I turned the corner, my heart lurched. There he was, the man in the devil mask. He stood at the far end of the aisle, illuminated by the dim, flickering light. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched me. My stomach twisted and my throat went dry. No fucking way, I thought, feeling my pulse hammer in my ears. He stood perfectly still, just staring. For a split second, I considered throwing the mask down and bolting, but something kept me rooted. Maybe it was disbelief, maybe shock. I told myself it was a coincidence, forcing my legs to carry me to the front. The cashier barely looked up from his phone as I approached, too busy scrolling through TikTok or Instagram or whatever. My skin crawled as I sensed the man in the devil mask moving closer. His eyes locked on me. I could feel it, the weight of his stare boring into me. "No, just this, please," I muttered, tossing the cheap mask onto the counter. It felt so pointless, but at least I wouldn't show up to Ben's party without something. The cashier rang it up slowly, the beeps of the register cutting through the heavy silence. I kept my head down, resisting the urge to look back, but I knew he was still there, watching me. "That'll be $10.53, please," the cashier said, snapping his gun, finally glancing up at me. I handed him the crumpled bills, my hands slightly shaking as I grabbed the change and shoved the mask into a bag. Without another word, I made a quick escape towards the exit. The bell chimed again as I pushed through the door, and the cold night air hit me like a splash of water. I exhaled sharply, tension easing from my shoulders. Instinctively, I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see him, the man in the devil mask, standing at the entrance, following me still. But there was nothing, just the empty store and a couple of people loitering on the sidewalk. He was gone, again. I shook my head and got in the car. I kept reminding myself, it's Halloween. Creepiness was just a part of it, and besides, I had bigger things to worry about, like not making an idiot out of myself at Ben's party. By the time I got to Ben's place, the party was already in full swing. Cars were parked up and down the block, and I could hear the bass from the music thumping before I even stepped out of my car. The house was decorated to the nines, fake cobwebs hanging from the trees, jack-o'-lanterns lining the walkway, and orange lights flickering in the windows. I could hear Rob Zombie's Dracula blasting from inside the house. I pulled the plastic hockey mask out of the bag and slipped it over my face. It wasn't much, but it would do. I didn't feel like going all out for this party anyway. I just wanted to blend in, have a few drinks, and hopefully avoid any awkward moments with people. The front door was wide open and people were spilling out into the yard, already tipsy and laughing way too loud. I stepped inside, and the smell of beer and sweat hitting me immediately. Ben's living room was packed. People in costumes, some elaborate and some half-assed as mine, dancing, drinking, and yelling over the blaring music. "Hey, you actually came!" Ben appeared out of nowhere, clapping me on the back hard enough to nearly knock me over. He was wearing a vampire costume, complete with fake blood dripping from his mouth. "Yeah, well, you didn't really give me a choice, did you?" I said, jokingly, raising my voice to be heard over the music. "Here, grab a drink," Ben shouted, shoving a plastic cup of beer into my hand before I could protest. We're playing beer pong in the kitchen. Come on. I hesitated. Beer pong wasn't really my thing, but it was better than standing around awkwardly in the corner. Sure, yeah, why not? I followed him into the kitchen, where a crowd had gathered around a table lined with orange plastic cups. Someone had even set up a fog machine, and the room was filled with swirling white mist, making it hard to see more than a few feet in front of you. I took a swig of beer and tried to relax. It was just a party after all. We played several rounds. The beer had begun to do its job with loosening me up, and I was actually starting to have fun. For a moment, I even began to question myself on why I didn't come out more. But just as that thought occurred, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him again. The figure, that devil mask, the long pointy nose and wide smile. He was standing in the living room, just beyond the edge of the crowd, perfectly still like he had been at the store. He didn't move or try to talk to anyone. He just stood there, watching me. My throat went dry and my stomach twisted into knots. What the hell was he doing here? How did he follow me? I blinked, half expecting him to disappear, like a trick of the light. But when I looked again, he was still there. He raised his hand and gave me a slow, taunting wave and turned to leave. Maybe it was the drinks, or maybe it was a feeling of security from the crowd, but anger began to boil up inside of me. I set my drink down and pushed through the crowd, trying to keep him in sight. I wanted to grab him and find out who he was and why the fuck he was following me. By the time I'd reached the living room, he was gone. Just like that. I scanned the room, my heart pounding in my chest. People were laughing, talking, and dancing like nothing was wrong. I thought about telling Ben, but what could I say? That some weirdo in a devil mask had been following me around all night. He'd just think I was being paranoid. I needed to calm down. I told myself it was just some guy playing a prank. Maybe someone who'd been at the mall earlier and recognised me. Or maybe it was someone I knew just messing with me. It was Halloween. People were supposed to be creepy. I grabbed another beer, took a long drink, and forced myself to relax. It was just in my head. It's nothing to worry about. I didn't stay at the party long after that. A couple more beers and some awkward small talk. I made my excuses and slipped out. I just wasn't in the mood anymore. All I could think about was that guy. Every time I turned around, I expected to see him and his stupid fucking devil mask standing there, just watching me. It was a relief to get back to my car and leave the noise and chaos behind. The streets were quiet as I drove home, the occasional group of teenagers in costume still wandering the sidewalk. My parents' house was only a few blocks away, and when I pulled up into the driveway, everything seemed peaceful. The porch light was on, and the pumpkins were lit on the front porch. I parked and walked up to the front steps, fumbling with my keys as I unlocked the door. The quiet was almost comforting after the noise of the party. I stepped inside, closing the door softly behind me. "Mum? Dad?" I called out, but there was no answer. They'd probably gone to bed already. I flipped on the hallway light and headed for the stairs, planning to just crash in my room and forget about the whole evening. But something stopped me. A sound, a drip, a slow, steady drip. Not the drip of a sink, a heavier, thicker drip. Slowly, I made my way towards the sound in the direction of the kitchen. My breath caught in my throat as my eyes scanned the house. As I got closer to the kitchen, the sound got louder, and there was something else. A smell, an odd smell, almost like copper, thick in the air. I rounded the corner into the kitchen when I saw the outline of something. No, not something. Someone. I froze. My blood turned into ice. It was my dad. He was sitting at the kitchen table, and so was my mum. Only, something was wrong. They were sitting at the table, side by side, like they'd been waiting for me. But there was something horribly wrong. So wrong that it took my brain a moment to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. Their heads were gone. The jagged red stumps of their necks were all that remained, blood streaking down their clothes, pooling onto the floor. The table, once warm and familiar, was now soaked in it. My stomach lurched, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I stood frozen, in shock, every muscle locked into place as my brain struggled to process the nightmare what was in front of me. At first, I wasn't able to comprehend if what I was seeing was real, or some twisted hallucination. And then, I saw him. The man, the devil, was standing in the corner, almost bleeding into the shadows. He was big, much bigger up close, and his posture was unnervingly calm. In each hand, he held a head, their heads, by the hair, the thick strands twisted around his fingers. In his hands, I saw the source of the sound. Blood dripped from their severed heads, landing on the tile floor with a soft, rhythmic plip, plip, plip. The sound was horrible, and for a moment, all I could hear was the sound of the dripping and my own heartbeat. He didn't move. He didn't flinch. He just stood there, perfectly still. His arms were reached up toward me, holding my parents' heads proudly, like two trophies. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was frozen in fear. I slowly backed away, step by step, my eyes never leaving him. His head didn't turn. His body didn't shift. He just stared, with that pointy nose, that huge red smile, as if he were frozen in time. I kept moving backward, my chest tightening with every inch I gained. The last thing I saw before I turned and ran was the man still standing there in the corner, heads dangling from his hands, utterly motionless, his cold eyes boring into me. He never moved, and somehow that was worse. I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I was halfway down the street, gasping for breath, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my phone. My fingers barely worked as I dialed 911, my voice trembling as I told the operator what had happened. When the police arrived, the house was empty. The man, the devil, was gone. They never found him. The police chalked it up to some kind of gruesome home invasion. But I knew the truth. He had been following me the whole night, maybe longer, watching, waiting for the perfect moment. He had wanted me to see, to know. He chose me for some reason. That was last Halloween, when my life was forever changed. I'm terrified it's going to come back for me this Halloween. I'm terrified that at any moment I'm going to see that mask again. I found this note nailed onto a tree on my front lawn. I really don't know how to describe it, so I just want you to hear it for yourself. I saw you today. It was your birthday. You didn't see me. You hardly ever do these days. Your skin looked so nice and healthy, and your eyes, they were the most beautiful I'd ever seen them. You've grown so much. I remember how different you used to look when you were younger. I remember the day I first met you. It was 4 years ago. I was sitting at my desk, head down, listening to the teacher rattling off names for attendance. The teacher called out a name I didn't recognise, and a stranger's voice answered behind me. Was there a new student? The teacher didn't pause for a second, just continued calling out name after name. I turned my head to where the voice had come from, and I saw you. A pale thing, so thin, your eyes so red, at a seat that should have been empty. I saw the fireflies flying around you, flickering, dozens of them, never straying far from you. I saw them going through you and coming out through your skin, like you were a mist to them. Can you believe I thought you were a ghost? No one else seemed to acknowledge the new stranger sitting at the back of the class. Class after class, hour after hour passed as I waited for you, waited for something to happen, for someone to notice you, for you to leave, for you to let out a ghoulish scream and claw at me like in the horror story I was certain I was in. But nothing happened. Teachers came and went, my classmates laughed and slept, and you just sat there. The bell rang for recess. The other kids ran to their mundanities for the day, leaving me and you together in the empty classroom. You stood up and pulled a chair from the desk next to you, making it face your desk. You turned your head to me and spoke. "Well, you're slow today. Come on, ask me your questions." I don't know why I didn't run away screaming at that moment. Probably would have turned out better for me in the long run. But let's not speculate. I guess, at that point in my life, I was pretty bloody lonely. I figured there was only a 50-50 chance you'd eat me, and the other 50 was that someone would want to talk with me. Kid priorities don't make sense to me either these days. So I went along with the flow. I walked over to your desk, sat down on the chair you pulled up for me, and asked my question. What were you? You told me you didn't know. You said that once you were a child, just like me, with parents and friends. You used to go to the same schools as me. Then, one day, one ordinary day, when you were just 10, you just woke up and you were like this, covered in fireflies, and no one could ever remember you the moment they concentrated on anything else. No one, not even your parents. You told me of how I'd notice you every day, how I'd think of you until recess every day, how I'd come to you every day, how we would talk every day, how we would meet for the first time every day for the last 3 years, about how I'd forgot the instance I walked out of the room, how everyone would forget you, how the fireflies would make them, how for the last 3 years you had been alone. Your story was very hard to believe, so I didn't. I asked what reality prank show I was on. You looked, well, unimpressed, and asked me to continue telling my story. I was caught off guard by the non sequitur. You said last time I was here, I was telling you a story, a horror story about a haunted house. As you detailed the story, goosebumps prickled my skin. It was a story I'd been making up in my head, a story I hadn't told anyone yet. At that moment, a million reactions were open to me, all simultaneously adequate and inadequate. But the only thing that seemed proper was to finish the story for you. So I did. Halfway through, you interrupted me to ask if my mother had recovered from her sickness yet. I had to shake my head, a bit ashamed at the fact that I had shared this private matter to a stranger. The story ended a few minutes before recess. My next class was in another room. You told me to go. Your steadiness took me back. You seemed so accepting of your fate, like you'd already gotten used to the idea of being forgotten forever. I was a kid back then. I wasn't a particularly smart kid either, and I was probably on the onset of a crush. So you can excuse what I did next as an example of my childhood stupidity. I grabbed my scissors, pressed it against my arm's skin, and dug in. As it drew blood, I pushed it forwards, till the cut formed the shape I wanted. Letter by letter, I carved your name onto my arm. Just so you know, I don't regret that. Don't get me wrong, kid power might have been able to make me do it, but it sure as hell didn't make the pain go away. It was one of the most beautiful, painful experiences of my life. But even then as a kid, I thought what was happening to you was unfair. I remember how your eyes looked when you saw that. The confusion. How strange it was for you that anyone would want to remember. I remember that look so clearly. When I woke up the next day and saw your name on my arm, I remembered you. I didn't forget. That day, for the first time, we had a conversation that wasn't so one-sided. You said no one had ever done anything like that before, and suggested I might have a mental illness. I won't deny it, that drew a little blood. As we talked, a creeping thought came into my head. Did you prefer it when I didn't remember? That night, I was sitting up on my bed, staring at your name on my arm, wondering if I should cover it up so I couldn't see it and give you back your privacy. When I heard a crash, I looked up to see my bedroom window shattered and a dirty rock on my floor. I looked out of the cracked window to see a dark figure on my lawn. You were outside, yelling about how we should hang out. It took me a while to get used to how bad you were at talking to people. Years without practice made you a bit rusty. That was alright. We had a lot of time. For the next 2 years, we spent most of our free time together. Most of the time, we talked. You'd tell me an aspect of your life and how you lived. You still stayed in your old house. Your parents never noticed the food that had gone missing, never noticed the extra room, or that you'd stolen the extra keys. One night, I confided in you that I was beginning to think you were a part of my imagination. Fight Club style. After all, what could you do to me that I couldn't do to myself? You spent the next month or so trying to leave bite marks on my ear or neck to prove a point. I still do have a few scars on my ear, so I guess you did. Looking back, I could see the warning signs even then. Your skin seemed to get worse and worse, paler and paler, and you'd rubbed your eyes raw. It was in winter we had our wake-up call. The morning began like any other. I woke up, brushed my teeth, and started searching for clothes to wear. It was a winter morning, and my room was dark, so I didn't see your name on my arm. The cold sent shivers throughout my body, and pulled out a long-sleeved jacket. A small bell rang in my head. Don't you usually roll your sleeves up? Yeah. And why did I? That was annoying. I finished tidying up and headed to school. On the school bus, I felt oddly content, like something I'd been worrying about just disappeared. I walked up the school stairs, down the hall, through my classroom door, and sat down at my desk. The same feeling of a burden forgotten hounded my mind. What was I forgetting? When recess came, I just sat at my desk while my classmates ran out. It felt like a ritual, but I didn't know what for. I was contemplating just walking out to join them, when I heard it. It was something small in the wind, like a whisper, but it came over and over, incessant. It sounded like my name. I knew this was strange, that this was worth my attention, but I felt oddly calm. Everything would be alright. Everything would be fine. Just ignore it. I sat there at my desk, my mind a war zone between two conflicting, contradictory voices, when I felt a force tugging on my sleeve. The moment I noticed this, my jacket sleeve tore open. I saw your name on my arm, and in your hand that had ripped my jacket open. You'd been yelling at me for over 20 minutes. I think that was the moment we realised how on edge our friendship really was. One accident away from complete erasure. We spent most of the next year in the town library together, trying to find out what the fireflies were. It wasn't really a problem for me. Because of my mother's treatment, my family couldn't afford to go on any trips, and our house didn't have any heating anymore, so I was just happy to spend my time with you. Trying to find information was a puzzle in and of itself. After all, how would I read about people I couldn't remember? And how would you find out who was special when no one could even remember enough about them to record it? We found our old family trees and records. Individually, we'd write down the names of everyone in the book on 2 lists, and then we would compare. The names I hadn't remembered to write down, but you had, would become the focus. They were the names who were under the curse of the fireflies. We compiled a list of suspicious books we thought could help us, because they were written by, or were about, the people we were searching for. I read the books, with the list of names side by side, reading it again for every page of the book. You scoured the internet on the library computers, on the lookout for articles about the people. Our search would lead us to the first glimpse we got of what was really happening to you. It was late at night when you found the picture. I was a bit drowsy at the time, and almost about to nod off, when I heard a sharp intake of breath. I turned to see you standing up, pointing at the screen. I didn't see anything, well, anything noteworthy. On the screen was a picture of a clearing somewhere in the woods. You held up your piece of paper where you had marked out 2 names. Susie Appleby Reagan, 13. Terry Appleby Reagan, 12. Siblings. For a moment, I saw the paper and the screen side by side, and then I saw them. 2 figures emerging from the woods towards the camera. They were almost humanoid, with the exception of their limbs, which stretched to nightmarish proportions. Their blank white skin was that of pure albino, and looked more like tree bark than anything you would expect to find on a mammal. A cloud of fireflies surrounded the duo. The shorter one looked emaciated. I could see their rib cages, around which their eyes, God, Their eyes so small, so red. The taller one, with its white hair, didn't look alive anymore. They were little more than skin wrapped around a skeleton. Fireflies swarmed out of the pair's empty eye sockets. Both reached for the cameraman. I looked at the article surrounding the picture. It was a blog posted by a hiker 20 years after the last mention of the two kids. The picture was a mystery to the cameraman as well. He had been wanting to go to the woods pictured for a while now, but he never actually remembered going there. The picture just appeared on his camera one day, out of the blue. For a moment, I looked at your face, your thin, pale face, with those red-veined eyes. Would that be you when my scar faded? Just a walking horror I'd glimpse, then forget. We worked through our reading list at a much faster pace, starting from that moment. Maybe we should have gone slower. At least every book, every website we had left untouched, promised hope. The books that we finished and tossed aside promised nothing but the clearing in the woods as one's future. And we tossed aside a lot of books. I believe I tore through 3/4 of my reading list before I stumbled across the journal. God, that horrible, horrible journal. It used to belong to a mental patient named Joey, who claimed to be a serial killer. He was locked up in an asylum when the police discovered his supposed victims never existed. He was diagnosed with a need for attention and shoved away. They should have electrocuted him. They should have fried him until his flesh melted and his hair burned. In the journal, he talked about how he carried out his killings. He knew things, bizarre and disturbing things no one else knew. He knew of strange creatures that lived in the woods. Of them, his favourites were the fireflies. I'm not going to tell you how he summoned these things. I trust you. I trust you more than anyone. But a thing like this belongs to the ground more than it ever will to the human mind. In the end, it's sufficient to know that these things were not fireflies. Joey would start his ritual by taking a kid, anyone he pleased. He could take them at any time, in the dead of night from their own homes, or in broad daylight from their front yards. It didn't matter if he was seen. He'd take them to his house and drag them inside. Usually, an Amber Alert came up at that point. He didn't care. Like I said, it wouldn't matter soon. He'd drag them to a special room in his house. Here, the fireflies would come and latch onto them. Now, nobody was searching for the kids. Not the police, not the parents, nobody. From then on, he could do whatever he wanted to the kid. He'd get bored of them after a day or two, after the child had broken. At that point, he disposed of them. Hacksaw, kitchen knife, anything would work. He detailed a large pit of bodies he kept in the woods, swarming with bugs. One day, I guess he got bored of that too, so he went right to the police station and turned himself in. Not on account of guilt, no. He just wanted someone to know about the stuff he was doing. Sick bastard. Oh, don't get the wrong idea. He never stopped killing kids. The asylum doors didn't stop him from doing what he liked. It just made him improvise. He made a new way. He modified the flies so they could survive without a host, just in a dormant state. When a child, he specified the age, would approach the swarm, it would latch on and begin its effect. Over the years, the child would warp horribly into things we saw in the woods. I wish I could hate him in peace. I wish I could say the world owed him nothing. But that wouldn't be true. He detailed a way out. On the final page, there was an exact explanation on how to get rid of the fireflies. You must have seen something in my face, because at that moment, you asked me if I'd found anything. I said no, and closed the book. A few minutes later, you shut down the computer, picked up the last book, and went through it yourself. When you reached the end cover, you tossed it aside. I asked what we should do now. You said it was alright. I could go home. We'd talk about it in the morning. I stood up and walked past the shelves of books. I headed for the library entrance, but stopped right outside the door and waited. I waited until I heard the sniffling sounds. I sneaked back to our table, where you were quietly sobbing. You had your head in your hands. I sat back down as you raised your eyes to me. You said you wished you had never met me, how happy you were when you had nothing to lose, how I ruined your life. You had never really gotten better at talking to people. That was the worst love confession I'd ever heard. I remember how we kissed that night. I remember your hands gripping my hair. I remember that kiss. I wish it could have been just a kiss. I'm sorry I ruined that moment. When my arms were around you, I was close enough to steal a firefly without you noticing. I remember holding the firefly in my hand. I remember how it struggled, until it didn't, until it was part of me. The firefly shifted, they came over to me, and left you. I remember the familiar look in your eyes, the confusion. I never wanted to see that confusion in your eyes again. You deserved to be loved, and you deserved to know that. I wasn't really living anyway. You reached for me. I pulled away. As the last lights of recognition faded from your eyes, and then you were just staring at a stranger, walking away into a crowd of strangers. That was a year ago. You've gotten so much better since then. You have so many friends now, so many people at your birthday party. You also look so much healthier. I haven't been as fortunate. My skin's gotten a lot paler, and my eyes hurt all the time. I couldn't go to school like you did all those years. I haven't wasted my time now. I found Joey's pit. The bodies, there were so many bodies. There's a grave for those children now. Without me, my mum could afford her surgery. She looked so happy. Just yesterday, I saw her playing with my baby brother. I saw you crying yesterday. You were with your friends, laughing. For a brief moment, your eyes met mine, and then they were so wet. I think I'm going away. For good, I think. You're not going to be happy if I stick around. I'm so happy I met you, even if you don't remember me. I found that note this morning, and I've been thinking about it ever since. Sometimes I go through depressive episodes. I feel so lonely, even with my friends. I don't know what's going through my head during these times, and sometimes I'd end up in a bathtub, a knife in my hands, and my wrists bleeding. Until now, I thought I was cutting my wrists. I wasn't. The cuts, they're letters. I've been carving a name onto my arm. Don't bother trying to find it. You won't find anything about the name of the town or what happened here. This manuscript to be found long after the events that transpired in this place. But I hope, against everything else, that you're someone in a position of power. I pray to God himself that you can prevent this from ever happening again. But I don't want to give you too much credit. Like me, you're only human after all. They're not. They've been around for a very, very long time. Fat chance, really. You probably don't want that responsibility. And even if you did take it upon your shoulders to track them down, you can't single-handedly stop the children. Their manipulators are not on the grid. Whoever engineered this is in control of the world on a very disturbing level. This is what I want you to do. Read these pages, if they're still legible, and take what you will from them. Don't go on a wild goose chase, and realise that when you find this book, that it will not be in the place where I left it. They'll move it somewhere else, to deceive you. I've left my mark on a tree there. Only then, when you see my name, will you know this is the place. You may have even heard of it in history books, but be assured, any rumours on Wikipedia or Google pages that you pull up will be guesswork at best. None of them are even close to the truth. When you find the place, there may already be another town just like it. That's what I'm trying to stop. If we're not successful, then just realise, above all things, that evil exists. I ain't talking about bad people or tragic accidents. I'm talking real, intelligent, ancient evil. It's calculated, and it's always one step ahead of you. Should you decide to take my place and become the paragon to prevent the corruption of the hearts and minds of children, I thank you in advance. I told you that I'm human. I lied. I used to be, before All Hallows Eve on that fateful night. I've been alive since then, far longer than any human being, and the reason is because I love children. I've always loved them, in their purity and their innocence. That's why I was taken in by their ruse. That's why I finally decided to put all this down centuries later. I won't be here much longer, and someone has to take up the burden. I've waited until I saw them return. They'll be back this year. They're planning the same thing again, and I can't stop them. Again, I can't expect that much from you, but I'm only giving you all of this so you'll believe me. I have to be believable. If you think I'm crazy, you'll throw this in a garbage can, and more people will disappear. It's time to tell you what happened. Back then, All Hallows Eve was the time for evil's ascension. You've all forgotten. If you left your house on that night in the old country, you were a devil worshipper. Halloween was not the term we used. We fled to the shores of this country because we're being persecuted for our lifestyle choices. We worship nature, the changing of the seasons, the solace of spring, autumn, winter and summer. In the purest sense of the word, we were druids. Our names and accents were English, but we were servants of the earth. We were some of the first to celebrate it as a holiday. The natives here were puzzled by our behaviour, but also frightened by it, so they left us alone. They misunderstood. We were not the ones to be afraid of. At the time, I was relieved. They'd attacked us in our settlements, time and time again, but as it drew closer to the end of October, they stayed away. Maybe in their own noble bonds with the earth and soil, they knew something terrible was on the horizon. They were right. John Hunter's little boy wanted to be a native, with a bow and arrow and a real headdress. Little Mary Taylor made a dress that was crafted after the local schoolhouse teacher's prettiest outfit. She idolised her educator, of course. They all had their get-ups. They were the first trick-or-treaters in what was to become the United States of America 150 years later. We sent them out to frolic about the settlement, collecting apples and tarts and other sweet things in their burlap goodie bags. There were no Snickers or Milky Ways, and yet the magic of this holiday held no less sway over them than it does the youth of our current time. They dress up as the Joker, the Power Rangers, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. These children were their predecessors. I sent my daughter with Mary and John Hunter Jr., despite our mistrust and wariness of the Anglican Church and the monarchs that presided over it. My little girl dressed as the Queen of England. I refused to crush her fantasy world, and so I simply indulged her. We heard promises to return after sundown, to say yes ma'am and no sir, and not to linger too long if they were invited inside the households of our community. We didn't realise that the house on the edge of the settlement existed until we saw the children go inside. There were no lanterns or sources of light in the windows, no fire or harvest dolls on the outside of the dwelling. As we sat in the middle of the town hall, indulging in the pleasures of distilled moonshine, amongst our brethren, we watched our young ones gravitate across the middle of our town, to the foreboding house that had seemingly been constructed overnight. When we gazed upon it, it seemed as though the place was shimmering. It pained my vision to look upon the building, as if my senses were being forced and propelled in another direction. Such a thing is difficult to put into words, but I seemed to be the only one who realised that all our kids were heading to the same place. When I questioned John Hunter as if something were odd about their actions, he stared at me as if I was insane. "What do you mean?" he asked. "There's no house there. They're going to play by the stockades." The sun had set by that point, but as I said before, none of them were concerned. The natives hadn't shown up for weeks. I decided to walk to the phantom dwelling that only I and the children could see, to peer inside and see who these new settlers were, and why it called to the youths as if it was a black hole in a sea of stars. I tried to stand outside, to look through the window, but when I saw what was happening, it was too late. I breached the doorway with my buck knife drawn, but there was nothing about the things inside that I could harm with a weapon. There's something deep inside of us, something embedded within the human spirit, that's perfectly aware when we encounter something truly terrible. Fear, horror, evil, revulsion. It all hits you in a spastic wave, like a fierce exploding bullet that shatters the innermost parts of your soul with a relentless and powerful fury. I saw it in that moment, standing in that darkened doorway. They weren't people, and they weren't spirits. They were halfway there, lingering over the unconscious bodies of my daughter and her peers in their hooded black robes of half-existence. There was one, in particular, who made me feel as though my eyes would pop like ripened cherries when I stared at it. It was the leader, the source of that tug, that pull, and it was slowly fading, disappearing like a gaseous black cloud of death through my little girl's nostrils and mouth. She was gasping for air, as if every breath after the one that preceded it were filled with acid, as if she was hungry for real, fresh air in her small lungs. With every breath, the figure faded deeper into her, along with the rest of them. I wish I could say that I was a hero, and that I hacked them all to bits. I wish I could say I saved the day, and made Halloween a night when the worst thing that children have to worry about is poisoned candy. It didn't happen. There was one of them left, floating toward me on an elongated, blackened tendrils of shimmering nothingness. By all means of my imagination, it shouldn't have been there, but it was, and soon it was going inside of me. The last thing I saw were their little feet, scurrying out of the phantom house and into the town. I felt that something terrible was about to happen. I had no idea. Everything went black, and then I was outside of myself. I was conscious, but observing my feet, my hands, doing things beyond my own scope of physical control. They led me and our children into our meeting hall, where, of course, the kids were embraced by the open, loving arms of their parents. I witnessed the betrayal, the brutal moments in which the truth instilled by love for family and offspring would transform into a cause for the destruction of our village. They absorbed them. There's no better objective for what happened. One moment they were there, and seconds later, they were nothing but dark essence, filtering in through the eyes and noses and mouths of their devil children. It was over in minutes. A night that should have been a celebration of nature, of the seasons, had turned into the end of everything that we knew and loved here in our new land. I started to fight it. The kids knew. The moment I began to resist, to try and reclaim my limbs and mind from the corrupting influence within, their heads snapped back from their feast of the souls to survey me in my struggle. My daughter's eyes were sunken, black pools of the abyss, devoid of any emotion, any semblance of the bright-eyed stare that she once held for me. I missed that the most, really. The way she'd run to me when I came from the fields every evening as the sun went down. I lived for that. What reason do I have to live now, other than to find her and stop them? I'm incapable. That falls on you, my friend. They took the part of my daughter that counts, the part that I loved and cherished, and turned her into a servant. You ask me why I'm still alive, and again, it's because I love her so very, very much. Her body is a hollow shell, filled with the blackness of evil beyond our world. The black-robed things have grown as centuries have passed. They are from some place that is not of this world, but their urgency, their hunger to devour and destroy is insatiable. It's an exponential, amplifying contagion on mankind, and All Hallows Eve is their pinnacle, their Christmas. I've done my best to warn you throughout history, to leave my mark in places where their desolation has left nothing but dust on the wind and empty houses. A deserted football field in a Texas ghost town, a card room in the back of a nightclub in Chicago, right under the nose of civilization, Roanoke Island, North Carolina, before John Rolfe found it in the aftermath. The thing that I expelled through sheer force of will alone has left me with an unusually long and empty life, devoid of anything but my desire for revenge. I have failed. I'm pleading with you. October 31st is not long away. My little girl, or what's left of her, is going to lead them to the same place. It's been refounded, except now it hums with sport utility vehicles and cell phones. I don't want this to happen to your child. Go to Roanoke and stop them from repeating the ritual. Those bodies they inhabit now are frail, on their way out. It's been almost 500 years. They'll need new ones on this Halloween. Look for a building that appears as though it shouldn't be there. It'd be across from that very tree where I signed my name, where I made my mark. I changed my title, named myself after the tribe of natives who knew it was coming, who, perhaps, tried to warn us, but for some reason, we failed to heed or recognise their warnings. They were more closely attuned to the earth than us, and yet they were still wiped out, eventually. Go on now. You don't have much time. Although I've spiced up the narrative a bit, this is a mostly accurate account of what happens to me on a regular basis. Throughout my life I've been diagnosed with various sleep disorders, the most common being insomnia. Some of the pills they give me to counter that end up with the opposite problem of me sleeping 15 hours a day, and one of the drugs they gave me gives me night terrors. In the end, I usually just take over the counter stuff to get to sleep. I just take a lot more than I should. 4 or 5 pills a night. It does the job, and I can still wake up and do things. Unfortunately, there's a 7 to 8 hour period where I am more or less incapable of waking up. My dreams have come to reflect this. This is one of those dreams. I'm in a room. It isn't particularly well lit, with only one small light in front of me. I look around. There's nothing in the room, save some cabinets and a chair. For some reason, I feel compelled to leave. When I do, I know I've made a mistake. I don't know why I feel that way. The hallway is unremarkable, with doors that presumably lead to rooms like mine, spaced consistently along the walls. I begin walking, looking for something. I don't know what, but I'm looking. I get to the end of the hallway and see that it opens up into 2 more hallways, leading to the left and right. I look down both. They seem to be the same. I choose the right. I get to the end of that hallway. It splinters off into one direction. I keep following it until I see that this direction doesn't actually lead anywhere. I go back to the original hallway I was in and go left instead. Suddenly, it hits me. I'm in a maze. As soon as that realisation hits me, I can hear something else. A high-pitched, shrill cry of some kind of animal. Its claws hitting the steel floor. There's something here. Something with me. A dangerous animal. Judging from the sound of its footsteps, it's walking, which means it doesn't know I'm here. Yet, if I stay quiet, choose the way I go carefully, I may be able to get to the end of this maze without it even knowing I'm here. I move faster, but I make sure my feet hit the ground as silently as possible, and it seems to be working. I get to another fork, but this one has 3 directions, 1 going forward and 2 going to the left and right. Going forward is always a trap, I think. I go to the left. It isn't long before I see another fork. It's going faster. It may be able to smell me. I'll give it something to smell then. I take off my clothes, quickly run down a corridor, a dead end, and leave them there. It isn't a foolproof plan, but acts of desperation so rarely are. I backtrack and keep moving. It's at a full gallop now. It knows I'm here. It's hunting me. I've got to keep moving. With any luck, it will go after the fake scent. That should keep it confused for a bit. I hit a dead end. The sound is getting closer, but given that this is a maze, it could be coming right down my hallway, or in the hallway over. I'm not taking the chance. I go to the nearest door, which I've ignored up until now for a reason I can't place, and try to open it. But it won't open. It's locked. I could force it, but that would make too much noise. I go to the next door. It's locked too. I look inside the glass window, and I'm shocked to see someone inside.
Hey,
I whisper.
hey, let me in.
The person turns toward me. I know who he is. He's a friend of mine. Hey, let me in. It's Max. I whisper, this time a bit louder. There's something out here, man. He looks at me, dead in the eyes, and turns around. I keep shaking the doorknob, but he doesn't turn to look at me again. Hey, I say again, on the verge of tears. Please let me in. And then it hits me. I haven't heard that thing's claws in a while. I turn around and see it. It's just been staring at me this whole time, waiting for me to notice. It's some kind of reptile. It's the size of a person, standing at about 6 feet tall. From head to tail, probably about 9 feet long. It's thin though. It's made to be fast on its feet. Not a single pound of muscle goes to waste. Its arms are long and bony, probably not very strong, but from the look of its claws, it doesn't have to be to get the job done. Its head is what scares me the most. It's about 1 foot long, and I can see its teeth. Long, thin, sharp and numerous. But the worst part is easily its eyes. 2 at the front of its head, dark yellow, with thin diamond-shaped irises. They're both looking right at me. I turn and run. It waits for a second and lets out a loud battle cry, a scream so high-pitched it'd hurt my ears if I had the time to care. Then it runs after me. I make a few quick turns. I happen to see it as I turn. It's going too fast to stop. It ends up sliding on the ground and running into a wall. If I keep making turns, I'll build up some distance. Of course, I find out the flaw in the plan as soon as it hit a dead end. It is a maze, after all. I turn and run back, figuring I can make it. I get back to an intersection. I find myself on the ground, sliding. I only have a few seconds to glance over, but I know what happened. I ran right into the damn thing. It's on the ground. I pushed it into a wall, dazed it. I'm on the floor. For a brief moment, our eyes meet. I can get up faster than it can, but it doesn't focus on that. It takes a quick lunge at me. I manage to put my hand on its head, shove it to the ground using its momentum, in the process of getting onto my feet. I make a break in the opposite direction, make a few turns, praying I don't find a dead end. I hear another of its battle cries. It isn't as loud or as high-pitched. It sounds almost indifferent. No, it sounds almost sarcastic. I happen to glance down and I see why. When it lunged at me, one of its claws slashed my arm. I'm bleeding. I'm leaving a trail for it to follow. It doesn't even have to run anymore. It just has to wait until I find myself in a dead end. But I'll run anyway. There's something that tells me there's an end to this maze. If I find it, I'm safe. I keep moving, keep making turns, but inevitably, it happens. I hit a dead end. I turn around to see it, just barely moving at a jog. It sees me and practically smiles at me. It knows I'm dead. So do I. I fight it off as best I can, hitting it, trying to wrestle it to the ground so maybe I can run away again. But it slashes at me with its claws so many times that a few of my limbs don't even work. It bites me, pulls things out of me, and all the while I'm thinking, God, this is familiar. Finally, it hits me. I had dreams like this. I have dreams like this. I'm having this dream. Normally, I'd wake up, but suddenly I find myself back at the beginning of the maze, inside that room. But I know it's a dream. A reoccurring dream since I saw Jurassic Park as a kid. I'm told that most people, when they realise they're in a dream, wake up. And I can tell that's what my mind wants. But I'm fully conscious. I have all my memories. I can remember what I had for dinner that night. I can remember taking my sleeping pills. I can remember what I was doing shortly before I decided to go to bed. But I can't wake up. I'm trying to get control of my real body. If I concentrate really hard, I can feel my arms and legs against the sheets. I can feel my eyes. They're closed. And I'm doing my best to open them. The feeling is like pushing against a wall. You push harder and harder, but it never budges. I'm trapped in that nightmare, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I figure, hey, if I can't wake up, maybe I don't need to. I'll just have a bit of fun until my alarm goes off. This is my dream, right? I can make it whatever I want to make it. Say hello to a couple of hours of perverse sexual fantasies. Except, that's not how it works. Not for me, anyway. In the hundreds of times this has happened to me, I've never managed to change the dream to something more preferable. I've been trapped in a dream that wasn't a nightmare, which wasn't so bad, if a bit boring. I have to deal with this until I wake up. I stayed in the room for a bit. Time is different in a dream. It felt like I stayed in that room, pacing back and forth for hours. In reality, it was probably a few minutes. Finally, I decide that I have to play this game. I go down the maze. It's different than what it was before, I think. I get halfway into it, and I hear that raptor coming for me. I get to thinking, maybe if I'm not afraid of it, it won't be able to hurt me. That didn't work. Maybe it's because it's hard not to be afraid of something that's eating you and tearing you apart. Or maybe my subconscious just really hates me. In either case, I found myself back at the beginning, like I respawned at a checkpoint in a video game. I did the maze about 50 times, each time ending in a rather painful failure. I actually tried to fight the raptor a few times. Closest I ever got to hurting it was jabbing its eye out. Once. But finally, it happened. My alarm goes off. I wake up. It takes me a minute to shake off the dream, the sheer terror of what happened, but I put it behind me. It's a Wednesday, a school day. I'm a junior in high school, and I've got shit to do. I get in my car, drive to school, and buy some breakfast and Burger King on the way, while listening to my best of Aerosmith CD. I get to school. I have to park all the way in the back of the parking lot and walk half a mile. I talk to some of my friends over the morning announcements, and I'm late to first period. My teacher dogs me for not doing my homework, but I blow her off. She starts the class. It's government, and we're going over the judiciary branch. The feeling creeps up on me, slowly. I happen to glance at a clock. It says 4:30, but I just figure it's off or busted. But then I have this feeling that I've been here before. I open some of my stuff to find that there are no words in any of my books. Then it hits me. I graduated high school years ago. The car I drove in on, I sold it last year. I lost that CD. And those friends I talked to before class, I haven't seen them in, I don't even know how long. And I'm pretty sure one of them is dead. I'm still dreaming. And I'm going to keep dreaming until my alarm goes off. And there isn't a single fucking thing I can do about it.